Bright light streamed through the window, revealing a lavishly decorated banquet table. The servants cheered one after another. "Congratulations, sir. Congratulations, young Master Isaac. You're only 10 years old, yet you've already received a recommendation letter to the Royal Academy. You truly are a genius, young master." Lyra smiled warmly. "Congratulations, sir. Young master, since today is such a special day, I've prepared all of your favorite dishes." Isaac happily accepted it all. Smiling, he replied, "Thank you, Nanny." He was Isaac von Goethe, 10 years old. Hans brought over a large box. "Please accept this as well, young master. It's just a small gift from me." Isaac flinched in surprise. "A gift? I told you there was no need to stand on ceremony like that." "He insisted on giving it to you. How could I not? Thanks to the medicine you gave us when my son was sick, the boy managed to pull through." Hans said with absolute conviction, "Compared to that kindness, this gift is nothing at all." Isaac couldn't help but be deeply moved. Hans. There was no way he could refuse now. "Thank you. I'll accept it." Jonas suddenly ran over, beaming with excitement. "Brother! Brother!" The young boy eagerly held up a lute. "Let me play a congratulatory song for you." Isaac was utterly surprised. Hans leaned in and whispered softly, "Young Master Jonas's lutenist skills are so remarkable that even the court musician couldn't stop praising him as a prodigy last time." Isaac smiled back, "Is that so? Well then, why don't you play something for me?" Jonas immediately got ready. "Yes, sir." Tiny fingers plucked at the strings, but the peaceful scene slowly dissolved away. Jonas, stop." Isaac snapped awake in bed, gasping. It took him a moment to collect himself. "Was it just a dream?" Isaac muttered under his breath, "How ridiculous. It feels like I dreamt of a distant past. A time I can never return to now." Familiar footsteps approached. Lucas quickly arrived, carrying breakfast with him. "Good morning, young Master Isaac." Lucas instantly sensed something was off, realizing Isaac was far from okay. "It seems you've had a nightmare, sir? You look terribly pale." Exhausted, Isaac rubbed his throbbing forehead and replied, "I just dreamt about some old memories." Lucas asked casually, "From how long ago?" Isaac faintly recalled a time about 20 years back, setting his breakfast aside. "It's been far too long." Rather than dwelling on those stale, ancient memories, Lucas suggested, "How about we try some fresh cheese, sir? Once you're finished eating, we can resume the swordsmanship training we left unfinished yesterday." Lucas quickly turned to leave. "Enjoy your meal then, sir." Isaac frowned, lost in thought. Around 20 years ago, when he was about 10 years old, exactly 1 month before entering the Royal Academy, he had caught a sudden, severe flu. The high fever dragged on for 3 straight months. Seeing no sign of improvement, his father, Count von Goethe, had to seek out the scholars at the Magic Tower. He received news. Is it due to a unique constitution? The mage confirmed, "As you know, every living creature possesses an innate mana vessel of its own. Mana circulates at a speed proportional to the size of that vessel. However, the circulation of mana in your son's body is extraordinarily abnormal. It flows so fast and fiercely that it's completely unpredictable. At this rate, it won't be long before his vessel shatters into pieces." The Count could only hold his head in utter despair. The truth Isaac had been running from all along finally crashed down on him. The mana inside his body erupted like a massive explosion, colliding violently with external mana, triggering a horrific mana burst. He suffered agonizing pain. Many people were killed and injured. When he finally came to his senses, he saw that they had died in that sudden explosion. Not only the residents of the manor, but even his father, Count von Goethe, hadn't escaped it. Isaac made his own decision: lock me away. Tears rolled down Isaac's cheeks as a suffocating solitude swallowed him whole in a place no one could ever reach. From that day on, Isaac stayed in the basement, where no one could ever be hurt again. As he ate, he murmured to himself, "I was only 15 years old back then, wasn't I?" Suddenly, a heavy coughing fit sounded near his ear. Isaac turned around in alarm. Hans was coughing. Bright red blood splattered clearly across his hands. Isaac's face turned deathly pale. He was coughing up blood. It was one of the symptoms of mana poisoning, caused by staying by Isaac's side for far too long. Instinctively clenching his fingers, Isaac rushed forward to support Lucas. "Since you stayed by my side when you didn't have to, you need to rest for at least a month." Lucas couldn't help but chuckle softly. If I'm not here, who's going to serve you, sir? Besides, young master, you don't really have any other friends besides me, do you? Isaac scolded him harshly. Do you want me to kick you out for speaking so insolently? Lucas obeyed playfully. Don't worry, sir, don't you know me by now? He proudly patted his chest. Even though you've caused dozens of mana explosions, I haven't lost a single hair on my head. You won't find anyone else like me. Isaac stared blankly, overwhelmed with anxiety. A single mistake could cost the boy everything. He turned away coldly. Now get out. I'm going to take my medicine, so don't disturb me. Yes, young master. You really are something. Lucas respectfully closed the door. Serving you is my absolute honor. The scenery suddenly shifted, and Isaac snapped back to reality. Congratulations, young Master Isaac. He was standing in the center, dressed impeccably in formal attire. People around him collapsed to the floor in agony. Painful moans echoed across the entire banquet hall. The room was suffocatingly silent and gloomy, a complete state of chaos. A familiar voice rang out. You finally arrived. Panicked, Isaac whipped around. Welcome back. Lucas stood alone in the corner of the room, his blood-covered face breaking into a smile. It's been a long time, young master. He jolted awake from the nightmare, drenched in a cold sweat. Isaac was alone in the basement once again. Lucas was dead. After coughing up blood and leaving, he never returned for over a year. Isaac had barely managed to hear the news of his death from his father. Another mana outbreak occurred that day, and Isaac locked his door tight. He had likely skipped meals multiple times. Isaac drowned in crushing regret. I should have kept my distance. I shouldn't have gotten attached. I should have been colder. Regret endlessly consumed Isaac. If only I had done that, then everything. A few more years passed, and he didn't even bother to eat or drink. The untouched food grew moldy, piling up day after day. Yet somehow, I am still alive. Therefore, from now on, I must press forward. The young boy from back then had grown into a middle-aged man, but his appearance resembled that of an old man. During more than 30 years of living underground, I poured my entire self into researching magic just to overcome this unique constitution. And now, books have nothing left to teach me, all that remains is intuition and enlightenment. Isaac muttered as if hypnotizing himself. You, the initiator of the journey, you, the one utterly alone to the very end. Can you stand alone before the vast infinity of a lonely world, where only mana and yourself exist? Awaken your true self. As years went by, I finally found a clue to overcoming my constitution. The quality of the meals seems to be declining lately. Isaac felt a slight touch of curiosity. Is something happening to the family? I should scrap off the mold before eating. Research materials kept being delivered as usual, but he sat back down at the table, gazing up at the markings on the wall. Isaac stared blankly for a second. Am I really 71 years old already? It had been an eternity since anyone came down here. He cautiously stepped closer. He was shocked to hear his brother Jonas's voice calling out, "It's me, Jonas." Are you sleeping, brother? Isaac was stunned in disbelief, hurriedly rushing toward the door. Jonas, why are you here? He fell silent for a moment. Jonas spoke hesitantly, May I come in? Isaac quickly backed away. Just stand right there and talk. How have you been lately? Jonas suddenly revealed, Do you know? Today is the anniversary of Father's death. Isaac asked numbly, How did Father pass away? Jonas replied carefully, It's a long story. Do you want to hear it? Isaac answered, If you don't mind. Jonas rewound the past. Then we have to start from 30 years ago. Back then, a war of succession broke out between the first prince and the second prince. The two of them talked for a very long time. It had been ages since he last spoke to another person. Isaac couldn't hide the joy in his eyes, feeling as if he had traveled back to his childhood days. He praised him sincerely. I have to admit one thing, you're a great storyteller. I completely lost track of time. Jonas let out a hearty laugh. Really? If I had known that earlier, I would have wandered the world and lived as a bard. Isaac suddenly mentioned, though with only one arm, it might not be that easy. Isaac flinched with a pang of guilt. I'm sorry, I'm truly sorry. Jonas told him that everyone loved him deeply. What a shame. One last time, I just wanted to see your face, brother? Isaac was instantly struck with horror. One last time, Jonas continued explaining. As the war raged on, his breathing grew faint. A gate had opened up. Monsters from an unknown, alien world. The fanatics of the new cult. the heinous atrocities they committed. When Isaac opened the door, it was the exact moment Jonas collapsed. He was no longer breathing. Isaac felt a sharp pang of grief, staring in shock at the sword lying beside Jonas. "Have you really been talking all this time?" Isaac decided to carry him outside. "Let's go. You can't just lie here forever." He helped his brother up, carefully taking each step up the stairs. He couldn't hold back his tears. "Why? Why are you so light? Just how much did you starve yourself?" The door leading outside was right in front of his eyes, freezing air slapping against his face. Isaac hadn't seen the light of day in a long time. Who would have guessed that this time he would witness such a tragic sight? A colossal monster had destroyed everything. Isaac reached his hand out to catch it. "Look, it's snowing." "Jonas, the ground is frozen, so I can't bury you right now. Let's wait until spring, and I'll bury you in the family cemetery. And after that, I'll rest too." As time slowly passed, trees began to sprout buds, bringing the warmth of approaching spring. A single butterfly landed on the hilt of the sword. A simple grave had been erected. Isaac finished burying his loved one. He tightly gripped a stone. Isaac gently raised his aged, wrinkled hand, and a blazing flame flared into life. He let out a soft, relieved smile. "Do you see that, Jonas?" Isaac was deeply moved beyond words. "Even if it's late, I finally did it." The stone in his hand snapped in half. "After decades of research, I have finally overcome this constitution." Isaac collapsed onto his knees in sheer exhaustion. "Now I can rest too, right?" All these years, he had been torturing himself with guilt. Could I be forgiven, even just a little? If I had been a little faster, if I hadn't wasted so much time in despair, would things have turned out differently? Isaac drew his final breath beside his family. Time drifted by, and he remained lying there motionless, when suddenly, a worried voice called out, "Young master, are you having a nightmare?" He vaguely recognized this voice. Hans. No, Hans passed away a long time ago. Dazzling light poured through the window. Isaac snapped awake from his deep slumber. He was young again, shock written all over his face. Hans pulled back the curtains and asked, "You're drenched in cold sweat, and your face is deathly pale." Hans stepped forward anxiously. "Did you not sleep well?" Isaac looked around suspiciously. "Am I dreaming? Or is this the final clarity before death?" Hans looked on, completely bewildered. "Young master, that's dangerous. Young Master Jonas, please come down right now." A childish voice startled Isaac. "I told you I'm fine." The young boy turned around right on cue. Jonas beamed a bright smile and called out loudly, "Brother." Isaac forced a weak smile in response, breaking into a cold sweat. Jonas held a doll, sitting up in the tree while smiling brightly at him. He put on an awkward smile, trying hard to act like nothing was wrong. Hans repeated his plea. "I already told you to come down right now. It's not a dream." Isaac accepted reality. "I've returned to the past. You, the initiator of the journey, you, the one utterly alone to the very end, can you stand alone before the vast infinity of a lonely world, where only mana and yourself exist? Awaken your true self, let go of your thoughts, cast aside the perspectives deeply ingrained in your life. Break the shackles of the past, and become your true self." A new opportunity had come to him. Porcelain shards lay scattered all over the room. The maids whispered among themselves, "This room is a total disaster. The young master is truly an ungrateful brat. So quick-tempered. When the master returns tomorrow, I'm handing in my resignation." They gossiped freely, assuming his illness was making his temper increasingly sensitive. Enraged, Hans made a move to step forward. "What on earth are they talking about? I'm going to go teach them a lesson." Isaac held him back. "That's enough, Hans." Insecure, he turned his head away. "They're not wrong." Isaac couldn't bear it either. "You shouldn't come visit me anymore. Hans, you were injured today simply because you were by my side." Unable to let it go, he turned back with sorrowful eyes, and knelt down before him. "No, young master." Hans persistently comforted him. "I still care about you. Right now, you're just going through a rough patch. It will pass, and when it does, none of this will be a big deal anymore." He offered a reassuring smile. "Isn't that just how life is?" Just like that, the person who once wore such a radiant smile ultimately lost his life in a mana explosion caused by my own hands. Everyone who cared about me died because of this heart. Isaac blamed himself. "No, I was the one who killed them." Outside, Jonas was still calling, "Brother, come play with me." Lyra spoke up anxiously, "Please come down." Isaac gradually hardened his resolve. "If this is reality, then what I must do." Hans smiled brightly, ready to take orders. Yes, young master. Isaac issued a cold command. Get out. Get out of my sight right now. Hans froze for a moment, then complied. As you wish. He had made up his mind. This is better. Being near me only brings danger. Hans paused for a brief moment, as if seeing right through Isaac. Please don't try to shoulder everything on your own. Sometimes, you can lean on us too. Isaac couldn't recall him ever saying those words, or perhaps he was still dreaming, wishing to hear them. He raised his hand and slapped himself hard across the face. Ow. Is this really reality? Then how did I die before? He turned his eyes back outside again. Isaac made up his mind, whether it was a dream or reality, it didn't matter. I must stop myself from letting my mana erupt ever again. In the past, there was a man who was also born with a unique constitution. His name was Zeke von Goethe. He reached a realm no human ever had, a level 10 archmage, and he was my distant ancestor. After investigating underground, I found the records he left behind. Thanks to that, I understood better how to utilize this special constitution. After years of meticulous research, I found a way to overcome it. Isaac finished very quickly. This was the first step. Runestones, the ultimate crystallization of my discoveries carved onto mana stones, then burned and fused together to form a runestone. He marveled to himself. His hands used to tremble with old age, but now it was so easy. It was so nice to be young again. To prevent the side effects of this unique constitution, the mana explosions, the mana vessel must be able to withstand the chaotic flow inside. But my mana flows too fast, too wildly for the vessel to hold. An ordinary person would die the moment it shattered. But strangely, my vessel regenerated as if it had never been destroyed. That was why it could explode 10 or 20 times. Isaac couldn't help but tell himself, I really am a walking disaster. This runestone safely helped replace the mana conduits. A continuous shock force was applied to the damaged area, forming new conduits from it. Thanks to this, the impulse of the raging mana flow was dispersed. He pondered deeply. The success rate was extremely low. Before dying, I had only succeeded a single time. Isaac still remembered it vividly. That tiny flame was proof. Tense, he began. Would it work this time? A fierce flame flared up, but it was unexpectedly huge. Isaac was completely astonished, yet quite happy with this transformation. He couldn't control it. This power. Isaac's heart ached sharply and violently. The conduits had reacted. A surge of mana coursed through his entire body. Isaac was stunned, utterly bewildered. The stone in his hand lit up, and a small flame sparkled out from it. It grew larger, growing more fierce. He realized with joy, I knew it. The conduits have increased to 3. Isaac stood dazed for a moment. Each conduit had a distinct function and route. Now I can cast 3 spells at the same time. It worked. He calmed himself down. No, this wasn't my goal in the first place. My goal is to prevent any more mana explosions from happening. That's why 3 conduits aren't enough. I must use magic more often to expand the conduits and reduce the burden on the mana vessel. Until I achieve that, I won't let anyone stay by my side. Time passed quickly, and evening arrived. Hans brought the food over with a bright smile. It's time for dinner, young master. He acted as if nothing was wrong. It's a ham sandwich. Isaac didn't know what else to say. I told you to get out. Hans didn't register a word. You've been eating so little lately, please take a bite. He was completely helpless. The man just wouldn't listen to a single word he said. Isaac couldn't figure it out. And what was with this gentle, sweet tone? He was so overly enthusiastic. I'll leave right after you take a bite. Hurry up, he probed. Hans, how old am I? Hans immediately replied, You're 12 years old this year, master. Isaac had no choice but to take a bite. Guess I'll just have to act like a normal kid at this age. He took a bite to try, and Isaac realized right away, this bread was probably made by the nanny. It's been a long time since I last tasted this flavor. He scarfed down his entire dinner, bringing a smile to Hans' face. Isaac suddenly remembered, where's the nanny? I didn't see her when I went out today. Hans explained right away, yes. Her son caught pneumonia. Isaac paused slightly, the soup still in his mouth, and placed his spoon back on the table. So she went back home then? He remarked coldly, a nanny leaving her post because of her own child. In any other family, she wouldn't be allowed to keep working. This place really is a charitable family. Hans' eyes widened in shock, seemingly not expecting the young master to say something like that. The fire in the room crackled. Isaac fell deep into thought, unconsciously clenching his fists. Isaac decided to inquire, is Hinder the only one with pneumonia? He let out a sigh of relief. Hans informed him, no, sir, all the children in that village have fallen ill. He nodded in confirmation, I see. I remember now. The outbreak happened right around this time. Black Goose Village was where it started. The nanny had lost her son in that tragedy and lived her whole life in unbearable pain. In her final moments, Lyra had said, that's wonderful, young master. Isaac thought to himself, I don't want her to go through that ever again. Resting his chin on his hand, he pondered. The cause of the pneumonia remained a mystery. The meal was temporarily left unfinished. Isaac changed his train of thought and stood up abruptly. Hans, were there any monsters slain near that area recently? Late one night, a large deer was strolling peacefully through the forest. Suddenly, it startled, sensing danger. A fireball unexpectedly struck the deer. It fled frantically. Isaac slowly walked over, showing a hint of regret. I thought it was a wolf. Isaac continued deeper into the forest. He was heading straight toward Black Goose Village. Hans was quite surprised by Isaac's question, a monster hunted in Black Goose Village? He tried to recall, I didn't get a good look at it myself. But someone from the magic tower came here to buy its corpse for research materials. Hans hadn't paid much attention back then. I caught a quick glimpse of it at the time. It looked just like a giant spider covered in silver fur. Isaac quickly narrowed down the target. If Hans' description was accurate, then that monster had to be, Isaac stated with certainty, a winter spider. Winter spiders weren't particularly strong monsters. However, they usually formed massive hordes thanks to their astonishing reproduction rate. The tricky problem lay in the amount of mana these creatures possessed. If exposed to high-density mana, the body would suffer from mana poisoning. When that happened, the toxin would slowly suffocate the victim. Isaac was gathering a large amount of medicinal herbs, working continuously without rest. The children in Black Goose Village must have been poisoned by the mana emitted by the winter spiders. Soon, his bag was stuffed full with herbs. Isaac had found the reason. Yet in this era, knowledge about mana poisoning was still extremely limited. That was why they mistook the illness for pneumonia. He looked back at his basket. This much herbs should be enough. Giving this to the kids would help ease their symptoms. Isaac knew exactly how to treat the sickness. However, the cure's effect was only temporary. To stop the disease from recurring, that monster horde had to be completely wiped out. I could ask my parents for help. But father is constantly stationed at the border fortress, while mother is busy traveling across the continent searching for a cure for my special constitution. Isaac thought to himself, if I just sit around waiting for them, Hinder's life will fall into critical danger once again. Isaac quickly reached the village, heading straight to the nanny's house. Lyra was sitting anxiously by the sickbed. She startled at the sound, cautiously opening the door. Who's there? Lyra was stunned in disbelief. As Isaac pulled down his hood, you look haggard, nanny. Lyra gasped in shock. Young master, she asked anxiously, why are you here at this hour? And what's with your clothes? Did something happen at the manor? Lyra carefully wiped the dust off his face. Goodness, you're covered in mud. Isaac felt a bit moved and was about to step inside. You haven't come to work for days, so I just stopped by to check on you. She panicked and stopped him. Wait, you can't come in. Lyra was only afraid Isaac might catch the sickness. They said Hinder has pneumonia. What if you get infected too? Isaac pulled out a mask and put it on. Is this fine now? She really didn't dare to agree. But sir, Isaac handed a large bag to Lyra. Don't worry about that. Take this. She asked blankly, what is in here? He answered briefly, chopped or crushed herbs. Put them in a pot to decoct twice, let it cool, and have him drink it. Isaac walked straight into the inner room, standing by the bed to observe. Isaac immediately concluded, these purplish blue spots are definitely mana poisoning. He shook the patient to wake him. Hinder. Can you hear me? The boy struggled to open his eyelids. As soon as he woke up, Hinder pleaded, young master, please don't fire my mother. Even while coughing, he tried to explain, Mom couldn't go to work all because of me. It's because I got sick that this happened. Isaac immediately reassured him, I won't fire her. He checked Hinder's temperature. Your mother is the only one who secretly snuck barley bread to me. Just focus on resting so you can get well soon. Time flew by until the next morning. He was led by the physician. This is the abandoned mine area you were looking for. Isaac peeked inside. Are you sure this is a limestone cave? It's really dark in here. The man asserted firmly, yes, I'm certain. Isaac handed over a gold coin as payment. Thanks. This is far enough. I'll handle the rest. The physician turned back to remind him, be careful. People have gone missing around this area before. Isaac replied as he walked, thanks for the warning. He had already ruled out other areas. Winter spiders usually preferred limestone caves. Since this was the only limestone cave in the region, there was a high chance it was their nest. Isaac had prepared beforehand. So before heading in, lights flashed around him. Need to make a few preparations first. Last time, thanks to unblocking new conduits in my mana system, I was able to cast 3 types of magic simultaneously. With this capability, the output power could rival Tier 2 magic. However, everything had its limits. If I pushed too hard, my mana vessel might shatter. Isaac calculated very carefully. Since I don't know how many winter spiders are inside, I can't just use magic recklessly. That's why I need this Frost Nightshade. Normally, its fruit is diluted to be used as an anesthetic or sedative. It looks identical to the descriptions in the books, but to winter spiders, this stuff is dead toxic. He decisively pulled them up. It was hilarious how they lived right in the same environment as their own fatal weakness. How ironic. Time passed quickly until noon. Isaac had a bag full of Frost Nightshade. His hands ached terribly. I should have at least brought gloves. The toxicity is really strong. Isaac felt ready. Alright, that's enough preparation. I made plenty of runestones back at the manor, so time to get going. He ventured deeper inside. The cave grew darker and darker. Isaac stopped in front of a vertical cliff. Strong winds blowing up to where he stood. Dying in a place like this would be a totally pointless death. Isaac looked around, searching. Looks like it's right down here, but how do I get down there? He happened to spot a rope ladder that seemed to still be in pretty usable condition. Isaac felt a bit nervous, but he didn't hesitate much. He made his way down the ladder, landing safely on the lower level. Isaac was so exhausted his hands and feet were trembling, his brow furrowed tight. Looks like I found the right spot. Piled up before Isaac were dry bones, corpses stacked high on the floor looking as if all their bodily fluids had been completely drained. And here were human clavicles. Could these be the missing people the hunter mentioned? A piercing noise echoed closer to him. Isaac flinched in surprise. The overwhelming pressure drew nearer and nearer. He cautiously prepared to face it, the magic power in his hands growing stronger. He was ready to fight. Isaac launched a fireball at the winter spiders, successfully creating a safe zone. These creatures were terrified of fire, so this would drive them off for a moment. Isaac unpacked some of his gear. I need to get ready before I get surrounded by them. He covered his nose and mouth with a mask, then brought out the Frost Nightshade. He closed his eyes to focus intensely. Isaac turned his gaze toward his target. First, the herbs. He decisively set the bag of nightshade ablaze. A faint poisonous scent wafted through the air. The winter spiders seemed to slow down. They hesitated, not daring to attack, trying to back away and create distance. This was Isaac's chance. Alright, let the hunt begin. He jumped up, overflowing with fighting spirit. Inside a study room, Isaac was sitting at his desk, working. Suddenly, a loud voice rang out from outside. What on earth did you do to let things get this bad? Curious, Isaac stepped closer to the window and looked down. Watch your mouth. You're standing before the noble lord. Liam shouted in anger. Right now I'm questioning the master of this land on why you failed to protect your own people. Why did you abandon Black Goose Village like that? Why? The other person suddenly barked, shut your mouth right now. Isaac turned around and walked back to his spot. So noisy. Maybe I should tell them to board up those windows? Or should I just move down to the basement altogether? Down there, it's quiet and nobody passes by. That way, I can focus better on researching my special condition. By the way, I should coat all the walls with Maryum, since it's a mineral with high magic resistance. It'll be really helpful when dealing with mana explosions. Isaac raised his head and asked, what do you think, Hans? The room was completely empty. No one was there besides him. Isaac stared blankly in shock, softly muttering, all right, Hans already. Isaac lowered his head and busily kept writing. Scratching sounds echoed out. The space fell quiet once again, his writing speed picking up. Isaac's eyes widened as he looked down, writing with even more intensity, his wide-open eyes looking terrifying. Nothing remained in the room except the sound of the pen writing. Meanwhile, back in a cave, the scent was still wafting faintly in the air. Isaac sat in silence, lost in thought. He looked up and quietly asked himself, why do I keep dwelling on these old memories? Looks like the henbane ice is working pretty well on these winter spiders. I can't force-feed poison to those monsters directly, but if I burn it and let the smoke spread like this, their bodies will slowly become paralyzed until they suffocate to death. Of course, I'm not exactly safe from the smoke myself, which is why I had to wrap a wet handkerchief around my face as a basic filter, then use the mana inside my body to purify the rest. At the same time, I created a small fireball, and used phase transformation to maintain a balance between purification, fire magic, and phase shifting. Now, I can cast 3 types of magic simultaneously through 3 mana circuits, a setup known as a multi-circuit network. Thanks to that, I managed to buy enough time for the spiders to weaken. Isaac pointed his finger forward. A massive explosion erupted, blowing several spiders to bits. He walked casually through the sea of fire. Suddenly, Isaac sensed something strange behind him. He pondered, it seems like they're all fleeing in the exact same direction. Isaac's eyes gleamed. Looks like there's a water source over there. He picked up his pace. Isaac's clothes suddenly caught fire, so he quickly ripped them off. These things really catch fire easily. At this rate, though, I'm gonna suffocate from the smoke. Plus, it's way too hot. Isaac threw his shirt onto the ground. Need to finish this fast. The cave turned freezing cold as night fell. He walked along the running stream of water. Isaac wrapped his arms around himself, shivering. It's freezing in here. I shouldn't have tossed my coat away. I didn't expect the temperature to drop so low it'd freeze like this. He suddenly snapped his head up. Wait, above Isaac's head was an egg nest. Are these all eggs? If it laid this many eggs. Suddenly, a noise echoed out, and the sound made him jump. Isaac quickly spun around to look, his eyes wide as he strained to see. The eggs were slowly falling down. Regaining his composure, he raised his hand. Isaac blasted a wave of fire forward. The roaring sound of flames echoed through the air. He stared in disbelief at the sight before him. A drop of sweat rolled down Isaac's cheek. A massive spider suddenly appeared right behind his back. Isaac sensed it instantly. The moment it lunged, he dashed away. Isaac leaped forward to dodge the attack. He turned around to look back. Damn it, why do these bad feelings of mine never miss? Isaac froze when he realized it was a winter spider queen, completely different from the rest of its kind. It was a monster capable of resisting fire and breathing frost. That was precisely why they were called that, winter spiders. The spider lunged forward rapidly. He scrambled to his feet to counterattack. A blast of fire slammed hard against its face. Isaac gritted his teeth, thinking, as expected, a few fireballs aren't enough to set this thing ablaze like the rest of them. The only silver lining is that its movements aren't too agile. Suddenly, a wave of pain washed over his body. My body is reaching its limit. For a 12-year-old body with zero real combat experience, pulling an all-nighter and then slinging magic all day made this outcome completely expected. While Isaac was lost in thought, the spider closed in. He forced himself to lift his head. Isaac's eyes narrowed slightly as memories of the past surfaced. Man, the barley bread Hans gave me was so good. In this barren northern region where even wheat can't grow, the only reason I got to eat soft white bread was all thanks to Nanny. Since I was a picky eater who absolutely despised rye bread, she traveled to the distant city every single week just to buy the highest quality wheat. Isaac suddenly let out a smirk. When I get back, I'm definitely asking her to make a ton of it. He pulled a shovel out of his backpack. Even if it's a spider queen, at the end of the day, it's still just an arthropod. Isaac also slipped off his backpack. The backpack swung from his hand before shattering to pieces with a sharp clash. The spider raised a leg as hard as rock to defend itself. The spider's eyes turned blood red. Holding the shovel, he charged straight at it. His expression grew dead serious. The shovel plunged straight into the spider's eye, spurting out a grotesque stream of green blood. Its agonized shriek echoed all around. Isaac gritted his teeth tightly and pulled back. He slid right under the spider's belly, tightly grabbing one of its legs with one hand. A loud thud rang out as both of them crashed down. Isaac dragged along the ground, forcing himself to hold on no matter what. I still lack the accuracy to hit them, and I don't have enough stamina left to keep spamming fireballs anyway. Even if I get lucky and land a hit, I can't deal a fatal blow to a fire-resistant creature. In that case, I have no choice but to abandon long-range attacks. This thing was completely different from the fireballs before. Isaac frowned, his voice laced with anger. Condense even further. He swung his arm, throwing a heavy punch right into it. Just die already and get out of my sight. A massive section of the spider's back instantly froze solid. He immediately felt it pouncing toward him. It forced itself up, charging at him furiously as if to land a finishing blow. A pain-filled screech echoed throughout the entire cave. It rolled back and forth across the ground. It repeatedly spewed out attacks of blue energy. Isaac reached out, wanting to pull something out. I need to get my hand out now. But his hand was soaked in blood and trembling so violently that he couldn't manage it at all. Isaac let out a sigh of relief. Got it out. A moment later, the spider's body was still burning. Both of them lay sprawled on the ground. A stone fell out from inside its body, looking just like a gemstone. He slowly opened his eyes. "Where am I?" The sound of a heated argument came from outside. "Did you report to them about the young master sneaking out of the manor? Is that Nanny's voice?" I wouldn't dare utter a single word. If that got out, it'd cause utter chaos. "Is that Hans?" Hans flusteredly replied. "Wait, you really didn't know anything? Didn't you hear that the young master went all the way to that abandoned mine?" Lyra put a hand over her face. "I'm helpless here too. A local hunter guided him there, but he's been busy hunting ever since, so he doesn't know the specifics either." Isaac thought to himself, "Right, I took down the winter spider queen and passed out after slamming my head on the ground. Thankfully, I woke up shortly after and managed to drag myself out of the ruined mine to get back to the village. Then I ran into Hans standing at the entrance of the village. He panicked when he saw me collapse and fainted right then and there." Isaac slowly fluttered his eyes open. "Yeah, thanks to following the young master's instructions to the letter, little Hinder has completely recovered." Hans smiled gently. "That's just how the young master is by nature. Sure, he's been a bit sensitive since the mana explosion, but how could a kind heart like his ever change?" Hearing that, Isaac felt a bit embarrassed. He sat up abruptly. Hans quickly looked over. "Young master, you're awake?" Isaac spoke up and asked, "How long have I been asleep?" Hans immediately replied, "You've been sleeping for about half a day, sir. How are you feeling?" "I'm fine, it's well within my tolerance." Lyra barked out in slight anger. "What do you mean within your tolerance? Why did you go to such a dangerous place all by yourself?" Isaac stayed quiet for a moment before saying, "I just accidentally fell while picking some herbs around there, that's all. Even if I told them a 12-year-old kid killed a monster, they'd just think I was talking nonsense. It's better if I just make up some excuse. Anyway, how's Hinder doing?" The young boy was lying on the bed with his eyes closed, but his complexion looked much rosier. Lyra sighed and answered, "Thanks to the herbs you brought, he's doing much better now. The same goes for the other kids in the village." Isaac raised his head and gave a small, relieved smile. "It's best to keep the mana poisoning a secret. If the higher-ups find out, the scholars will step in immediately." "Did all the winter spiders die out? Who on earth could have done such a thing?" "It's going to be troublesome if the spider corpses in the mine are discovered." Lyra suddenly asked, "By the way, how do you know so much about those herbs, sir? Even the doctors sent by the Lord had no idea." Isaac immediately turned his face away. "I just happened to read about them in some books." "Stop bringing it up, it's time to go." "Hans." He looked flustered. "Right now, sir? It's snowing really heavily outside." Isaac turned and got out of bed. "If the fact that I snuck out of the manor gets exposed, your fate won't end up so pretty either. Am I right?" Lyra brought a basket of fruit over to Isaac. "Please take these with you as well, sir. The villagers asked me to give them to you to show their gratitude." He picked up a fruit and looked at it. "Nanny, take another week off to rest. Won't you feel better working only after Hinder makes a full recovery?" She looked a bit awkward. "Would that really be all right, sir? The head butler will definitely not let it slide." Isaac suddenly said, "Who said I'm just giving you time off to rest?" He held up an apple and ordered, "Use these to make some jam." She asked back, "Make apple jam?" Isaac took a bite and replied, "Yeah. So we can eat it with barley bread on the day you return to work." Lyra stood there stunned for a second. Then she smiled, a tear pooling in the corner of her eye. "How about I make some apple pie too?" Isaac smiled in approval. "Sounds great." In the morning, the sky was clear with light sunlight. At a large manor, Isaac was running while managing his breathing. A week had passed, and his speed was exceptionally fast. During this time, my mana circuits have also undergone a change. The 3 mana rotation cycles have increased by 1, bringing the total to 4. Thanks to that, my mana circuits are significantly more stable. The number of spells I can cast simultaneously has also increased to 4 layers. Fighting those winter spiders and pushing myself to the limit probably helped a ton. The diligent effort of running every day definitely played a huge part too. Using magic requires thorough calculation as well as sharp intuition. It's a process that drains an immense amount of mental energy. When the body is exhausted, the mind collapses with it. A sharp mind needs a tough physical foundation to back it up. The reason I reached my limit so quickly back at the abandoned mine was precisely because of this frail, unrefined body. In my past life, Lucas used to train my physical endurance regularly. An image of Lucas smiling flashed in his mind, and his face suddenly darkened completely. A voice suddenly called out, "Young master." Schiller brought Andrine over. "Today is the day for your regular checkup, sir." Isaac stopped and wiped his sweat. Head butler Schiller placed a hand over his chest and smiled brightly. "Greetings, young master. How are you feeling today?" "This is my father's personal doctor, the most renowned physician in the surrounding lands. Just do it right here." Andrine stepped forward to inspect him. "It seems there are no serious issues today. In fact, you look healthier than ever." "Well then, I will begin adjusting your prescription." Isaac thought indifferently, "Just jumping to conclusions like that, huh?" He opened his briefcase, revealing 6 medicine vials inside. "This is a medicinal ingredient called panacea. It helps stabilize the flow of mana." Isaac picked up a vial and looked at it. "Panacea, huh? Father really went out of his way to get me top-shelf stuff." In common tongue, panacea is understood as a cure-all. For some, it's used as a stimulant and a stamina booster for soldiers, although this medicine is known for stabilizing mana flow to make it run smoother. In reality, that's a misconception born from translating the ancient language. Its actual effect is stimulating the flow of mana. In other words, it's no different from poison to someone who has lost control of their mana like me. However, given the current situation, it will act as a suitable catalyst. If used properly, it will help me increase my mana rotation cycles. Well then, I shall see you next month, sir. Alright, thanks for your hard work. After Andrine left, Isaac turned around to find Schiller staring at him. "Do you have something to say?" Schiller responded, "You seem quite calm today, young master." He wore a puzzled expression. "Wouldn't you usually fly into a rage whenever you were examined, sir?" "That's precisely why all the doctors in the territory refused to serve as your personal physician." Isaac burst out laughing upon hearing the question. "Is that so? Was I supposed to throw a fit?" Schiller went silent for a moment, then moved his lips. The next sentence made him freeze. "I heard that you cured the pneumonia of the children in Black Crow Village." Isaac calmly asked, "You know about that too?" Schiller answered bluntly, "I only heard it from Hans, sir." Isaac thought to himself, "Turns out you interrogated Hans." Schiller's face turned stern. "If this gets out publicly, the Council of Advisors will definitely not let it slide. I'll let it pass this time. But from now on, I hope you will exercise more restraint, young master." Schiller looked at him with a cold gaze. Since way back, I was never able to get close to Schiller. He was always a dry, rigid head butler, a cold old man who kept his distance from everyone. Yet, Schiller suddenly picked up Isaac's bag. "If you really can't help yourself, sir, then at least discuss it with me first." He was completely caught off guard by that sight. According to what Jonas said right before he passed away, Schiller, who had served the von Goethe family since the previous master's time, remained in his position until the fall of the von Goethe house. And then, he sacrificed his very life. In truth, he had always cared deeply about this family. Isaac nodded with a smile. "I understand. Thank you, Schiller." He simply stayed quiet without saying a word. Schiller pondered for a moment before asking, "By the way, you've been going for a run every day lately, sir? Is there a specific reason for that?" Isaac raised his head and glanced at him. Throughout history, every mage who reached the 5th circle or higher rigorously trained their body. If a body is meant to channel mana, shouldn't it require a matching physical foundation? Schiller's eyes widened slightly in surprise. When night fell, inside a room, news arrived that the eldest young master had completely cured the children's pneumonia in Black Crow Village. The verification process was complete. Given his specific physical condition, it will be difficult for the young master to use magic in the future. However, I presume to suggest that the path of a scholar or an alchemist might suit him better. With this, his lordship will surely be relieved of some of his worries. Suddenly, a knock sounded at the door. "Come in." A maid stepped inside. "Pardon the intrusion, sir." Schiller looked up. "Rosa. Is it you again?" She replied with a bit of fear in her voice. "Please forgive me, head butler. The maids keep vanishing without ever coming back. I'm not sure about Clara's case, but as for Annette, she's a very hard-working girl who hasn't taken a single day off in 3 years." The corners of Rosa's eyes reddened. I'm certain something terrible has happened to her. Off in a corner, isn't this whole thing super weird? A group of servants stood chatting with each other. In just 2 short months, 3 maids have already gone missing. Don't you think so? It's not like Region G is an easy place to live in the first place, Bill said smugly. Since it's way up north, the weather is harsh as hell. On top of that, bandits and monsters keep causing trouble. Lily pointed her finger at him. So what? Are you saying you're planning on packing your bags and running off too? Hey, I'm just throwing out a hypothesis here. She lowered her head slightly and said, at the very least, Annette isn't the type to suddenly vanish without saying goodbye like that. How hard did she have to work just to afford her father's medicine? Bill scoffed and countered, she probably just got sick and tired of taking care of that sick old dad of hers. Who knows, maybe she ran off with some lover. Hearing that, Rosa and Lily flared up in anger. Watch your mouth. Bill spread his arms out nonchalantly. Just kidding. Actually, I have my own theory. If you don't give a damn, just listen up for a second. Come on. Bill suddenly put on a creepy expression. Here's what I think happened. Bold thought crossed his mind. Could it really be black magic? The 2 girls stared back in bewilderment. Black magic? What else could it be? I mean, this is a house belonging to a family of mages, isn't it? Not to mention the young master's condition hasn't been looking too great lately. If you were the master of this house, wouldn't you be willing to resort to magic at any cost? Lily let it slip out. Are you saying those missing girls were used as live sacrifices? Rosa immediately yelled out. What the hell are you blabbering about, Bill? If you dare spread any more of those outrageous rumors, I won't let you off easy. He just kept talking. And what are you gonna do if you don't let me off easy? What about me? Maybe I'm right, Rosa shouted in pure fury. The master isn't that kind of person. He was even kind enough to take in a sinner like you. Bill remained stubborn as ever. What? After talking all that nonsense, now you're crossing the line. Suddenly, a voice from behind made him jump out of his skin. This story sounds pretty interesting. Isaac crossed his arms, looking at Bill as he asked, why don't you tell me the details? He nervously spoke up in a timid tone. It all started 2 months ago, sir. Bill's eyes darted away, refusing to meet his gaze. First, the maid Hilda suddenly vanished out of nowhere. Then a few weeks after that, Clara vanished without a trace too. Finally, just this weekend, Annette went to mass and completely disappeared, never coming back. The room fell dead silent. Isaac asked in a cold voice, do you know why? Bill thought to himself for a moment before speaking up. How can a mere child have such a terrifying glare? I really don't know much about that, sir. Isaac immediately spoke up. Just speak truthfully. I promise I won't hold it against you. He blurted out in surprise, are you serious, young master? My word is absolute, of course. Bill lowered his head in silence, but Isaac's abrupt question threw him into confusion. Do you think the cause of all this is me? Isn't that already painfully obvious? Just take a look at Hans, young master. He's supposed to be your closest personal servant, yet his body is constantly covered in bruises and scars, and the guy is always groaning in pain. I can't say for sure about the others. Bill's voice trailed off, growing quieter and quieter. It's high chance it's him. I really shouldn't have opened my big mouth. Isaac called out to him in a dark, heavy voice. Bill panicked and frantically begged for mercy. Please spare my life, young master. I haven't even gotten married yet, nor do I have a single child. The priest once said this life was given by God. Isaac stared at Bill calmly. So you don't want to die, huh? Isaac extended his hand and offered a proposal. Then serve me to redeem your sins. Even as he was begging, he froze dead in his tracks. Night fell, and the wind rustled softly through the air. As a cluster of blue flames floated quietly in the dark, Isaac sat on the bed, staring up at the sky. Rosa, Annette. The images of the 2 girls flickered within the blue flames, as he spoke up with an indifferent look on his face. Right, those were indeed their names. Ever since Hans and my nanny passed away, they were the only maids who voluntarily stayed behind to serve me. The medicine vial fell to the ground and shattered into pieces. As a small drop of blood dripped down, drip, drip, Isaac waved his hand and ordered, both of you back off, I want some peace and quiet. The 2 maids panicked, but Rosa still forced herself to speak. Young master, what about your hand? He immediately barked out, didn't you hear me tell you to back off? These medicines are useless anyway, so don't you ever bring them here again. Despite her fear, Rosa spoke up anyway, but young master, please don't give up hope just yet. I'm sure everything will be alright. His face darkened, his voice turning ice cold. Hope? How could you ever understand the feeling of taking the life of the person you love most with your own two hands? Isaac clenched his fists tightly. Can you even begin to imagine that kind of pain? She looked at him in total confusion. Annette took a step forward and said, I understand. I, too, caused my friend to lose her life by these very hands. Hearing that, his voice softened a bit. Your friend? Rosa cast her eyes downward. Annette continued, back then, if only I had turned back to look at Clara even once. If I had reached out my hand in time, maybe I could have saved her. Annette looked down at him and said, I know your situation is extremely unique, young master, but everyone in this world can end up doing things against their own will, at least once in their lives. It can happen to absolutely anyone. Back then, it was Annette's very sense of pessimism that brought me a strange kind of comfort. Bringing it back to the present, I really should have asked her more about that back then. Suddenly, a knock sounded at the door, and a voice echoed in from outside. Young master, it's me, Bill. Sitting on the bed, he asked, have you found any trace of those maids yet? He quickly replied, yes, sir. It didn't take me long to track it down at all. I went around asking the beggars along the main roads, and their stories matched up completely. Upon hearing that, Isaac pressed further. So, what's the result? Bill explained clearly. Turns out it was all done by human traffickers. They used sweet, tempting promises of bringing people to the prosperous South, only to secretly sell them off later. Hearing that, he looked perplexed. If they wanted to go south, they could have just gone on their own. Why did they have to go through brokers? Bill raised his hand with a scoff. Oh, young master, you really don't know how the real world works yet. Think about the transportation costs for a long journey all the way down south, the money to hire mercenaries for protection against bandits along the road, and handling all the paperwork just to secure free citizen status upon arrival. Do you really think a group of weak, defenseless women could handle all that on their own? Isaac rested his chin on his hand, lost in thought. I see. That actually makes sense. Bill let out a sigh and thought to himself, kids will always be kids. This little brat doesn't know a single thing about the real world. An idea suddenly popped into Bill's head. Wait a minute, could this be? He spoke up out of nowhere. I had to fork over a pretty penny just to get those beggars to spill the beans, sir. Because of that, I burned through all the travel money you gave me. Could you spare me a little extra, young master? He asked back in disbelief. All 20 silver coins? That's equivalent to half a year's worth of wages. Bill burst out laughing in response. Isaac thought to himself, it's just because everyone is letting their guard down way too much. He spoke up and said, a little money is no problem. What I need is to find them as fast as possible. Bill grinned brightly. Oh my, young master, you really are generous. Is there anything else you need me to do, sir? Isaac immediately replied, of course. I'll make sure you're handsomely rewarded for this job. Do you want to give it a shot? Bill clenched his fist in excitement. Of course, sir. Man, I hit the jackpot this time. Turns out all you need in this life is a smooth mouth to live comfortably. If I can keep pulling this kid's leg, I'm definitely gonna make a fortune from now on. He's literally a golden goose that just showed up. The only downside is that this brat is like a ticking time bomb. But hey, no risk, no reward, right? Thrilled beyond belief, he said to him, I can take you to that broker's place right away. The laughter inside Bill's head grew louder and louder. In this life, fortune favors the bold. Shortly after, he stood behind iron bars, looking completely dazed. The inside was filled with skulls and dust, while he was stripped down to nothing but a pair of shorts. Bill grabbed the iron bars and screamed, how the hell did things end up like this? Meanwhile, Isaac was standing in a corner, watching him. Why do I have to be in a godforsaken place like this? Holding a mana stone, he let out a subtle smile. In the middle of the dark dungeon was a small drainage ditch, and the hands gripping the iron frame were trembling uncontrollably. Bill gritted his teeth in utter frustration. Damn it, how did it come to this? He recalled what happened earlier, when everything was still going smoothly. Back when I secretly took the young master out of the manor to the city of Bern. Meeting the broker who took the maids was easy enough. He claimed to be a noble heading down south. However, at that moment, the broker's expression suddenly darkened, but his eyes swept over Isaac's refined, high-class outfit. Before settling on that clean, handsome face, a sly smirk spread across the broker's face. I get why the young master easily became a target for human traffickers. After all, he's got a pretty face. Bill thought about his stripped-down body, left in nothing but boxers, and wondered why on earth did I end up like this? He grimaced and whipped around to look back. On top of that, you don't even look the least bit harmed, young master, meaning they didn't even dare lay a finger on his hair because he was top-tier goods. And unlike in books, he was busy focusing on his own business. Do I need to condense the mana a bit more? While Bill was fuming with rage, he himself had been stripped clean from head to toe, except for his underwear. Unable to take it anymore, he raised his voice. So what do we do now? We've come all this way, you must have a plan, right? Right? Bill pressed him frantically. Stop playing with that rock and say something already. Isaac simply reminded him calmly. Where did all your manners go? But he didn't care anymore. Can you really give a damn about manners in my position right now? We're about to die. Bill let out a heavy sigh. I'm going to find Annette and the others. Of course you are, if you even have a way out of these iron bars, that is. Suddenly, he raised his hand, and a vibration echoed right behind him. Immediately after, a hole was carved straight out of the iron frame, crashing down. The look on Bill's face instantly turned into sheer shock. He began switching to a soft, gentle tone, calling out, "Young master." Bill put on a kiss-ass smile. You're not gonna leave me behind here, right? Isaac responded nonchalantly. Don't you know me at all? He pleaded desperate. Come on, please don't be like that. His voice echoed outward. This place was like a maze. Two guards immediately grew alert. What was that noise? Let's go check it out. Bill was still threatening him. You might end up getting lost and robbed, you know. Unexpectedly, Isaac whipped around, preparing to leave. You think I can't handle a little thing like that? Well then, I'm off. Best of luck. Wait, young master, he yelled out in sheer panic. He stopped in his tracks and turned his head back. Bill suddenly dropped straight to his knees on the ground. He begged desperately, please save me. I'm begging you. I'll do anything, absolutely anything. His footsteps came to a sudden halt, as Isaac's eyes clouded over with deep thought. He thought to himself, you know what? Isaac looked at Bill's current state. I've seen you do this exact same thing before. Overlapping images from the past flashed before him. Please save my life, young master. Back then, he had begged in the exact same way. I must have lost my mind. I shouldn't have done that when you were kind enough to take me in, young master. Von Goethe put on a stern face. Bill, you used to be a bandit. When House von Goethe overwhelmed those bandits, you survived by handing over information about your organization. But this time you betrayed House von Goethe, and he made his decision, so I can no longer trust you. He tried desperately to beg for mercy and fear. My lord, please spare me just this once. Schiller couldn't take it anymore and shouted loudly, enough. He questioned him directly. Do you think the crime of attempting to sell secret records of House von Goethe to a criminal organization can be taken lightly? Bill cried nonstop. Please, I beg of you, I will never betray you again. But in the end, that sword came swinging down, finishing him off. Von Goethe said, you would have been quite useful if you weren't so greedy. Isaac's face remained completely expressionless. I still vaguely remember that day. As a bandit well accustomed to the underground economy, Bill Chuck managed to track down the servants using what he knew. And using up all those silver coins was probably just another one of his lies. He pondered, if my memory serves me right, the criminal organization Bill tried to sell the secret records to in my past life is the exact same one that kidnapped the servants. Now, those bastards have expanded their power through human trafficking and will soon spread across Von Goethe like mold, torturing people along the way. Anything that poses a threat to the family must absolutely be eliminated first. Right then, he pulled a scroll out from his coat. You said you'd do anything, right? He held it out right in front of Bill's face. Then I have something I need you to do first. Inside the dimly lit, dark room, several men stood lined up beside the dining table, as one of them carved meat on a plate. Father, you're not eating anything again. He popped a piece of meat into his mouth, while the guarding men turned pale, covering their mouths as they listened. Please eat something, father. How am I supposed to watch you grow thinner like this every single day? Nes raised his fork and pointed it forward. You're in there, aren't you? On the opposite side, a human skull was impaled on a wooden stake. Just wait a little longer. On the day I succeed with dark magic, we will meet again. He let out a gloomy sigh. You're not answering again. Has your soul grown weak? Suddenly, Nes asked one of the men standing nearby, Hey, where's my bathwater? The man stammered, saying the only ones left now were the merchandise waiting to be sold. Out of nowhere, a massive hand came slamming down. Nes lifted him high into the air with just a single hand, as red blood began gushing out, splattering all over his face. The remaining men listened in sheer terror as he spoke. This punishment should be enough for my bathwater, right? Aeneas cast a glance at them. I'll be waiting. The subordinate immediately replied, I'll prepare it right away. After that, he left and walked down the dark hallway, leaving only 2 men and a corpse behind in the room. One of them held his head inside. Damned dark magic. How many times has it been already? In that bastard's food, in his bathwater. Next time, just hand over the merchandise we're supposed to sell. Otherwise, every single one of us is gonna end up dead. He stood up and flipped the corpse over. Stop complaining and just focus on taking good care of him. Suddenly, a noise echoed out, making the 2 of them peek outside the door in curiosity. But the dark hallway was completely empty, with not a single soul in sight. They glanced at each other, their expressions suddenly turning into sheer panic. The noise terrified them. What was that sound? Calmness completely vanished from both of their faces, as one of them quietly swallowed hard. All of a sudden, something emerged. Aeneas's hair-covered head came rolling right to their feet, immediately followed by Aeneas's blood-soaked face with wide-open, staring eyes. The 2 of them were instantly scared out of their wits, the overwhelming horror making their legs buckle underneath them. Right at that moment, a figure stepped forward. Holding a blood-stained blade, he said, "Give me some water." Everyone's face turned pale as a sheet. Bill curled his lips into a subtle smirk, his bloody, gruesome appearance terrifying them to the core. Bill? Running a hand through his hair, he repeated once more, "Hand over a glass of water, you bastard." Their hearts pounded frantically in their chests. Thump, thump. Right at that moment, a figure stepped forward. His bloody, gruesome appearance terrified them to the core. Bill? The hand holding the knife trembled slightly. Damn it, why am I doing this? Bill's eyes couldn't hide his resentment. This is all because of that bastard. Prior to this, Isaac had held out a piece of paper in front of his face. You said you'd do anything, right? Then do this first. Bill stared blankly. What's this? He answered, this is a contract. Isaac summarized it quickly. Clause 1, Party B, Bill, must unconditionally obey all orders from Party A, Isaac. Clause 2, Party B, Bill, is strictly forbidden from disclosing any information related to Party A, Isaac. Finally, he emphasized, Clause 3, if Party B violates any of these terms, the penalty is death. Bill's face flushed with panic. Hold on, what kind of conditions are these? Pulling a knife out of nowhere, he said, you will sign it in blood. That's the only way for the magic to take effect. Awesome, this'll get the job done. He immediately squirmed. Are you crazy? How the hell am I supposed to sign that? Suddenly, a voice approached nearby. Who's there? Isaac let out a faint chuckle and reminded him. Come on, we don't have much time. He hit him right where it hurt. Don't you want to live? Outside, rapid footsteps were rushing closer and closer. Right in front of him sat that dangerous contract. The sound of heavy boot soles running against the stone floor became clearer by the second. Bill closed his eyes tightly in frustration, grimacing, when he suddenly struck hard, knocking the knife to the floor. Damn it! Next, Bill gritted his teeth and cut a slit right into the tip of his finger. Without a moment's hesitation, he pressed his finger down onto the paper. The moment he finished, the contract suddenly burst into a bright glow. The corner of Isaac's lips curled into a faint smile. Right at that moment, the guards arrived as well. Who the hell are you guys? How did you get out? Bill screamed out in sheer panic. They're here. Immediately after, those 3 guys took a direct hit right to the face, instantly passing out and slumping straight to the floor. He asked in bewilderment, are they dead? Isaac explained, they're just unconscious. Bill still couldn't fathom how. Suddenly, the mana stone in his hand caught his eye, and he stared blankly at the magic. The 2 of them walked to another section outside the prison cells. Bill walked ahead holding the knife, striking up a conversation with a fake smile. That's the first time I've seen ice magic. You're incredible, young master. But Isaac didn't hold it in particularly high regard, understandably so, since ice magic wasn't very practical. He was surprised. It's fine, though. He just replied casually, it only looks that way. Suddenly, Bill brought himself to a halt, whispering in a hushed tone to report, bandits. You 2 hide behind the wall over there. Isaac said, Bill, what do you need to make ice? That's a sudden question, he urged, take a guess. He hesitated for a moment before answering, wait. Water? Isaac manipulated a small droplet of water, correct. Whether it's humidity in the air or a puddle on the ground, you have to shape the water into what you want. The stream of water swirled and followed a sequence: compression, condensation, expansion, and evaporation. it had to go through these 4 states. He kept explaining patiently, controlling each state individually is easy, but executing them seamlessly in sequence is not. Bill looked toward the guard impatiently. We're gonna get caught. Hurry up! One guy was yawning when he suddenly noticed something. Before he could react, Isaac had already rushed forward. Who are you guys? He calmly tapped his hand, and a massive water orb suddenly shot out toward them. He could only stand there taking the hit without understanding what just happened. The guy's face froze solid, and in the next moment, he was struck. Phase transformation magic. He condensed the water orb back down. Because of all these steps, this type of magic wasn't commonly used in real combat. Isaac glanced downward. If I didn't have this magic spell, I wouldn't bother using it either. In his hand, he held the Ice Mana Stone. I found it from the corpse of the Winter Spider Queen. Even though this magic isn't widespread, Ice Mana Stones hold a certain academic value, so they sell for a pretty decent price. He thought to himself, this really turned out to be surprisingly good stuff. Bill walked over to check on the guard. If ice magic is so inconvenient, why even use it? He's knocked out. Isaac explained, because it isn't common, very few people know about it. It's hard to distinguish from blunt force trauma, and since ice melts, it leaves behind no evidence whatsoever, making this magic perfect for committing stealthy crimes. That dark, terrifying expression made Bill freeze right in his tracks. He whispered, "Aren't you gonna finish them off?" Right then, 2 other guys spotted them. Who are they? How did we get outside? Bill was still puzzled. Even if you kill them, they'll just be replaced soon enough. He hid behind his back. I mean, won't they just keep doing these things in the end anyway? Isaac stepped out and answered, that's precisely why I'm keeping them alive. The 2 who just arrived were knocked out cold instantly. The space between his eyebrows furrowed slightly. The one I actually want to kill. Unfamiliar footsteps appeared within line of sight, and his guard immediately went up. Enea's massive body came walking over all by himself. He looked at them with suspicion. You guys? Bill screamed out in sheer panic. Eneas, he hastily tattled, young master, he's the leader of that gang. He's a psychopath who rips people apart with his bare hands. He asked back, is that so? But Isaac wasn't worried in the slightest. Saves me the trouble of tracking him down. Anyway, the water orb began to emit a gentle glow, after which an ice spike was manifested. He controlled it, launching it right at him. Eneas's eyes widened as he was about to get impaled. To everyone's surprise, he swung his arm and slapped it away. Bill blurted out in shock, he blocked ice with his bare hand? Isaac was also somewhat surprised. You've got some strength. Which tribe are you from? He immediately grumbled in complaint. Is this really the time to compliment him? What do I do now? I'm gonna get ripped into 9 pieces. Suddenly, Eneas spoke up. Hey, you guys. He chuckled playfully. You're the merchandise, aren't you? I was just worrying about not having enough bathwater. Talk about lucky. Eneas's gaze shifted toward Isaac. And a mage, huh? You'll make excellent material for my dark magic. Hearing that, Bill began to panic. Wait, spare me. I'm not part of this. He slowly reached his hand out. He covered his head in terror, begging, I'm just a normal guy. Suddenly, his fingers froze mid-air. Bill opened his eyes in utter confusion. A long ice spike shot out from the block of ice behind his back, impaling through his chest, right before his eyes. Stunned. The block of ice he had blocked earlier. At this moment, Isaac still maintained his casting posture. Eneas coughed up a bit of blood. Seeing him collapse, he finally called out to Bill. Isaac looked him dead in the eye and declared, from now on, you're the leader of this place. You know what needs to be done, right? His face stiffened, his hand gripping the knife tightening its hold. Then, Bill let out a roar and charged forward. Isaac stood there with a slightly somber expression. He closed his eyes and told himself, everyone has to do things they don't want to do, at least once in their lives. It happens to everyone. Annette's words seemed to echo in his ears. You probably won't be able to undo it or erase it. It will haunt you and leave its mark for the rest of your life. Young master, back then, as she wiped his bloody hands, she said, then, you'll be left with only 2 choices. One is to bear the shame of that sin, and the other is to try and live for that person too. Isaac's expression carried a deep sense of restraint. He recalled the past. Back then, Annette, crushed by the guilt of losing her friend Clara, gave me that exact advice. Up ahead, a few guards ran into him. Bill threatened them, hand over a glass of water, you bastard. He told himself, but I don't need to hear that advice a second time. The carriage wheels rolled continuously forward. Inside the carriage sat Annette and the other maids. Though her clothes were stained with dirt, her eyes still shone brightly. Annette walked toward the castle, because in this life, she wouldn't lose her friend. Hilda brought up the topic brightly. Have you heard? Nobles from the south are looking for women from outside the city. Hearing that, Clara couldn't help but ask out of curiosity, why? She guessed, maybe the women in the city are too ugly? So they're looking for pretty women outside to marry? She began to have her own thoughts. Should I go to the south too? Hilda slightly covered her mouth and whispered mysteriously, I did a little digging. Her cheeks flushed slightly pink. There's someone who can take us to the south, we just need to give them a little money. Annette, who was sitting quietly, was caught off guard when asked out of nowhere. Hilda, Annette, do you want to come along? But she turned it down, I'll pass. I still need to take care of my dad. Now, Annette stood in the study, making her report. That was the last time I saw Hilda and Clara. We never saw them again after that, Isaac thought to himself, just as Bill suspected. He then asked, were you kidnapped while looking for those two? Annette nodded in confirmation, her face looking somewhat heavy. When I saw them again in the sewers, they had truly lost their minds. Her voice was filled with despair. If I had stayed there for a few more days, I probably would have gone crazy too. Isaac empathized with that, it was completely understandable. He recalled that gruesome scene, as that was a place where human beings were either sold off or eaten. If a 70-year-old like me felt that way, let alone these young girls. Out of nowhere, Annette confessed, actually, I could have escaped. Recalling it made her feel visibly uncomfortable. The iron gate they used to lock me in was broken. Back then, Annette stood in front of the iron bars, frozen in place. Next to her, a soft sobbing sound suddenly echoed out. She turned around to see Clara with her hair completely disheveled. Deep down, Annette's heart wavered. If I stay for a few more days, her hand gripping the iron bars trembled, leaving Clara behind. Hearing that, Isaac's eyes also grew pained. Annette kept talking, if so, then maybe I personally sent my own friend to her death. That's what happened. He expressed his understanding and gratitude. It must have been hard for you to recall those memories. Thank you for telling me. She suddenly stammered, her posture looking a bit embarrassed. There's one thing I'm still curious about. He asked curiously, what is it? She recounted how when the bandits brought us back to the manor, Clara and I were so happy. Annette recalled that moment, trembling slightly in fear as she bit her fingernails. No, if I go back to the manor. If I go back, I'll. Hearing that, Isaac was also confused. If she goes back, she'll die? She replied helplessly, yes. It seems like it wasn't just that she was afraid of being punished. He rubbed his chin, giving it serious thought. I think I get it now. I'll look into it. Annette stood there looking at him with a small smile for a moment, then suddenly covered her mouth and giggled. Rosa mentioned this. She said maybe the bandits randomly released us because of you, young master. Annette's teasing is pretty silly, huh? Isaac crossed his arms helplessly, thinking, she's surprisingly sharp. She continued, but honestly, it makes sense. Because the only person who ever paid any attention to servants like us is you, young master. He was slightly taken aback, surprised by those words. Isaac's green eyes opened wide, after which he called out softly, Annette. Isaac spoke sincerely, thank you. I'm glad you think so. He was about to say more, but then stopped himself. Anyway, never mind. We'll talk later. Though a bit confused, Annette didn't ask further. Yes. I'll take my leave now. The door to the room slowly closed. Isaac stretched both arms forward comfortably, an undeniable look of relief washing over his face. Isaac thought about Annette. I've stumbled upon an unexpected talent. Teaching her magic might actually be worth a shot. That day, sunlight poured through the castle, accompanied by the sound of hushed whispers. Did you hear about the maids who just came back? A few maids gathered together, whispering back and forth. They were supposed to be fired. But now young Master Isaac took them back. Word has it he had a massive argument with the head butler over it. Why would he go to such lengths for mere servants? Don't tell me he has feelings for them? Well, the young master is at the age where he starts noticing women. Bill carried a tray of supplies into the storehouse, setting it down carefully. Just then, a figure stepped forward. Jordan called out softly, Boss Bill. He dusted off both of his hands. Bill frowned in annoyance. Damn it, I told you not to call me that. Bill, the new boss of the criminal organization. Earlier during their escape, Isaac had told him, this sewer is always crawling with vagrants. Even if I clean out one organization in an environment like this, another group will just pop up sooner or later. He instructed, instead of doing that, wouldn't it be better to keep them under control and manage them? Bill thought to himself, you planned this whole thing from the very start. Is that why you forced me to sign that contract? He held his head, gritting his teeth in frustration. Now, if there's any dispute or rebellion, won't my neck be the very first one to get snapped? After that, he composed himself and sat down. Bill began asking about the situation. Did NEAs only plant you guys in the manor? He replied, yes, the previous boss told us to keep an eye on the manor. Hearing that, he let out a scoff. That bastard NEAs was always planting people in nobles' houses. Guess he wasn't just a crazy scumbag after all. Jordan added further, and the boss always prepared a tribute. Bill frowned upon hearing that. Tribute? What tribute? He explained, a tribute offered to the knights around this time of year. The only reason we were able to stay rooted in this godforsaken hole is because those knights backed us up. The look on his face turned to sheer shock. Knights backed you guys up? A few days later, in Isaac's bedroom, he created a fireball in his hand, then threw it forward with full force. His emerald green pupils shone brilliantly. The fire was merely a distraction. The real attack was the ice pillar right behind it. The fireball aimed straight at the wall up ahead. Suddenly, his fist clenched tight, and the fireball instantly vanished, leaving only the ice spike to slam heavily into the wall. The ice shattered into pieces following the impact. Once it was over, Isaac was panting heavily. After killing NEAs, my mana circuits increased from 4 to 5. He understood that he needed to practice casting multiple spells simultaneously and continuously, because against NEAs, he had simply gotten lucky. Recalling earlier, his familiarity with the terrain, the guards who were weaker than him, and his carelessness, all of these factors caused NEAs to lower his guard, allowing him to take his life. His eyes narrowed slightly in self-reproach, his fist clenched by his side trembling. Otherwise, I would have been taken. Isaac collapsed flat on his back onto the bed. Before dying, Jonas told me many things, and among them was the matter regarding the enemies of House von Goethe. They were all optimized specifically to deal with mages. He closed his eyes, telling himself, there won't be any luck like there was with NEAs. I need to become stronger to protect von Goethe. The next morning, a loud call woke him up. Isaac sat right up. What's going on? Lily and Hans stepped inside. It's morning, please wake up, young master. She gestured to Hans. Hans, the young master's clothes. He immediately turned to grab them. Yes, ma'am. Placing his feet on the floor, he asked, why so sudden? Why are you doing this? Lily brought over a basin of water. What do you mean, sir? She announced with a bright smile. The master has returned. Hearing that, he couldn't help but startle, his heart thumping heavily a few times. Outside the city gates, von Goethe rode in on horseback. Thinking about that, he asked absent-mindedly, Father is back? Flashing back to a moment in his past life, tally marks carved into the wooden wall were used to mark the passage of days. Inside the pitch-black room, a young man with long, light-colored hair sat at a writing desk. Using a quill, he jotted down page after page of mysterious text in his diary. The door suddenly burst open, and the Count walked in holding a greatsword. The master of the house turned his eyes toward the desk in shock upon realizing his son's unexpected presence. The knight observed the person in the room with a look of surprise mixed with suspicion. His son Isaac stood motionless facing his father in the middle of the room, creating an atmosphere so tense it was suffocating. Isaac looked down at his father's boots as a few wood shavings and leaves fell scattered onto the floor. As the Count helped his son in the dark room, carefully trimming his silver hair, the father said that if this was truly what his son desired, he would respect the choice without hesitating for even a single second. He continued in a sorrowful tone, saying he could assure that everything would end peacefully and painlessly. An older Isaac, with wrinkles lining his face, watched the scene unfold with tired, grief-stricken eyes. The Count continued carefully cutting his son's long hair while the young boy remained in absolute silence. The father asked one last time if this was what he truly wanted, and the young man firmly confirmed it. Overcome with emotion, the Count embraced his son, saying this would be the last time they would see each other. He pressed his forehead against his son's in an affectionate gesture, sharing a deep final farewell before departing. The father said he would go ahead and wait for him, then stepped out of the room, leaving the young man all alone in the dark. He instructed his son to come to him without holding any regrets in his heart. Returning to the present, the sunlight of a beautiful day streamed through the large, gorgeous windows of the study inside the manor. Isaac thought to himself that this was the very first time they faced each other directly since that tragic day. The young man sat down and greeted his father, who was focused on reading important family reports. The Count mentioned he heard Khan had recently helped the sick children over in Black Goose Village. Isaac was surprised by the question, and his father revealed he heard the story from Schiller, though it was hard to believe. The boy humbly replied that he had merely gotten lucky in finding a cure for the children. He lied, claiming he found the cure for that strange pneumonia in an ancient book. The father tapped his fingers on the wooden desk as he contemplated his son's story. The Count shifted the topic, asking how his physical condition had been after his recent training. Isaac responded with relief, stating he no longer caused any human explosions, and the doctor they hired was indeed extremely talented. Sunlight streamed through the gorgeous, vibrant stained glass windows of the library, illuminating the vast study. Father and son continued their conversation in a calm, peaceful manner inside the large study room. The Count looked at his son seriously and asked about the command situation and daily life back at the castle. Isaac took the initiative to ask specifically for news regarding the important border fortress. The master asked back about his son's interest, and the young boy replied that one day he would have to go there to serve. The Count explained that the situation there remained unchanged, still full of monsters, dark nights, and heavy snowfall. He added that the only big news was that they had stopped by the Scorched City on their way back. The young man recalled that the Scorched City was precisely where the dangerous underground sewer system was located. The father pointed at his medicine vial and revealed that a terrible, extremely serious incident had occurred there. He stated that a private soldier had attacked his own commander, and Isaac deduced that the traitor must have been eliminated. The Count shook his head and explained that the injured commander himself unexpectedly requested a court-martial. Isaac fell into deep thought, wondering why the commander would make such a suspicious move. Suddenly, the door opened, and the Count greeted the newcomers. Two knights entered the room, respectfully greeting the young master and praising how much he had grown. Isaac glanced at the two men with an analytical eye in silence, attempting to read their thoughts. One of the two knights, the one wearing a headband, smiled friendly at him, completely unaware of his suspicions. The Count allowed Fickle and Randolph to enter and politely dismissed Isaac to go rest. The young boy immediately obeyed his father and left the room, closing the large, exquisite wooden door behind him. Out in the hallway, he overheard the voice of one of the two men demanding that a court-martial be convened as soon as possible. That person insisted that they had to quickly get rid of the traitor to maintain discipline in the army. The Count thought he was being too hasty and asked Randolph if he agreed with the execution. Randolph calmly replied that he only followed direct orders from the commander-in-chief. The other guy sighed and scoffed, asking if he would really say that even after the captain ripped off his ear. Outside, Isaac walked down the hallway in deep contemplation, trying to use his bright blue eyes to expose the secrets of the two men. He analyzed the situation, knowing the border secrets were involved. He remembered that the insignia on their uniforms showed they were border guards. He cleverly deduced that the injured man named Randolph was the main victim of that rebellion. Suddenly, the sound of rushed, panting footsteps on the red carpet caught the young master's attention. A servant came running over in desperation, urgently asking him to follow him and leave this place. He frantically revealed that an extremely urgent situation had just occurred inside the castle. The young master followed the servant through the outermost, secluded areas of the massive stone castle. The main character asked him what was so urgent, and he said he had heard rumors about human trafficking in the sewers. The young boy replied that he already knew. Bill revealed that some people had taken bribes to turn a blind eye to the whole case. With an extremely serious expression, the young master immediately asked who the perpetrators were. The servant broke into a sweat out of stress, hesitating to reveal the identities of those involved in the conspiracy. He said the guilty ones were the Winterband Knights, leaving the young boy utterly astonished. The servant added that the body of one of their allies was recently found at the entrance to the sewers. He said all the victims' limbs were severed, leaving only the pinky finger of the left hand. The young master asked what happened next, and the servant looked very hesitant. He confessed that a horrifying event had occurred early this morning. He frantically recounted that when he woke up, he mysteriously found that exact severed finger lying right on his bed. The enemy had sent a direct warning message through one of their subordinates. The threat clearly stated that if the money wasn't prepared within 2 days, the situation would get much worse. The servant panicked, realizing his finger would be the next one cut off if he failed. He begged for help and blamed the young boy for pushing him into that dangerous leadership position. The young master maintained a calm composure while coldly analyzing the severity of the entire incident. He asked if anyone witnessed the attack, and the servant replied that there was one witness. The witness recounted that a flash of a blade appeared before their eyes, and everything was over in the blink of an eye. The only notable detail they could remember was that the attacker had bandages wrapped around his head. The young boy narrowed his bright blue eyes as he recognized that quite distinct physical feature. He simply said calmly that he understood the situation, making the servant angry at his cold attitude. The young master began walking slowly, calmly telling the servant not to worry. He affirmed with absolute confidence that this guy wouldn't die, and that he would protect his life. He recalled that his father had returned along with 2 knights requesting a court-martial. On their way back, they had stopped near the sewer area and eliminated a criminal to set an example for others. All the physical traits described by the witness matched that border knight completely. The young master gritted his teeth in fury as he realized the arrogance and betrayal of his own guard unit. He walked with firm, resentful steps, thinking about the hypocrisy of those who called themselves border knights. He concluded that if everything was true, they were no different than a cancer that needed to be cut out from the kingdom. The young master headed down to the dungeon area, his footsteps immediately catching the attention of the guard on duty. The guard was quite surprised and asked what brought the young master all the way down to the bottom of the dungeon. He asked directly about the presence of the prisoner sentenced to death for the crime of rebellion. In one of the darkest cells, the criminal was waiting, bound in chains by his terrible final fate. The young master firmly declared that he came here only to talk to the prisoner. The chained man opened his eyes, revealing a sharp, terrifying gaze in the darkness. The young boy revealed his purpose for coming was to confirm whether the knights were truly involved with the bandits. Standing in front of the iron bars, he asked directly if the man knew about Naya's notorious criminal organization. He added that he had heard about their involvement in the horrifying human trafficking operation. Hearing this, the prisoner reacted immediately, clenching both fists with uncanny strength. He glared at the young master with an extremely dark, hostile gaze. Maintaining absolute silence in the cell, the young master closely observed the prisoner's appearance and felt his face looked quite familiar. He asked if he knew about the mysterious connection between the city sewer system and his military commander. The chained man merely pressed his lips tight, refusing to answer the young boy's questions. He violently shook his heavy iron chains and coldly warned that he would only speak this one time. Suddenly, he lunged forward and grabbed the iron bars tight, startling the young master standing in front of him. The prisoner roared in anger that he knew nothing and demanded the young boy get the hell out of there right now. The young boy continued to face his fury with absolute calm, completely fearless and unbothered. Ignoring the outbursts, the young master calmly asked what this rebellious prisoner's real name was. He answered, "His name is Carlson," and the young boy smiled upon hearing this critical piece of information. The young master finally remembered his face, then asked if he wanted to keep lying, calling him Kulla. The prisoner's eyes widened in sheer horror as he realized his real name had been exposed. He backed away in shock, causing the heavy iron chains to clank together in the dark cell. The rebel stared at the young boy in deep shock and asked how he could possibly know that secret name. The young man recalled that he learned this name when the kingdom's bloody civil war was at its peak. That entire horrifying power struggle began at the official throne succession ceremony. On that occasion, the second prince suffered defeat and decided to betray the fatherland, colluding with the empire to seize power. This terrible betrayal ultimately caused a bloody clash right in the middle of the celebration. As the kingdom collapsed, the people rose up and started a rebellion led by Kyle himself during the Civil War. Now he was posing as someone else, desperately asking how a mere child could know so many royal secrets. The young boy replied in an extremely calm voice that he had simply read that whole astounding story in a history book. The book contained detailed records along with beautiful illustrations of many famous criminals across the continent. The work depicted the young leader as a military genius, destined to become the 7th swordmaster of the world. Facing him directly, the young master realized that the description of his talent was entirely accurate. The prisoner radiated an impressive amount of mana thanks to harsh training. He swallowed hard, trying to imagine the destructive power this warrior would possess once fully awakened. In his past life, the rebel had escaped punishment and angrily demanded the young man tell him how he knew all of that. The young boy told him to calm down and revealed that he also knew he was the legitimate son of a legendary warrior. The warrior began to tremble with tension and whispered, asking who this young boy really was. Isaac asked how he could serve in the military without recognizing the eldest son of the family ruling this land. The prisoner asked if he came to finish him off, but the young boy said he didn't care about the life of a mediocre mercenary. He added that he wasn't interested in a deserter who had vanished off the map for over 10 consecutive years, either. The man doubted the speaker's identity, but Isaac told him he only wanted an answer to one single, serious question. With an extremely serious expression, the young master prepared to extract the crucial information he craved. He asked why the border commander was directly involved in the human trafficking ring. Christie looked at the burning candle and said if he was the young master, he ought to know what was going on there. He stepped forward, chains clanking, and said, "That's the main reason why I ain't saying a word." The young master crossed his arms and thought, well aware of the man's strong reluctance to cooperate with the investigation. He warned that the commander would pin all the blame on him and turn him into a wanted criminal. He coldly concluded that if he did that, the prisoner would never be able to carry out his revenge plan. The word revenge made the prisoner's chained hands tremble instantly out of hatred. He fell completely silent, and the two continued to stare at each other in heavy, tense silence inside the castle dungeon. The young boy decided to turn away. Realizing that this man wouldn't be as easily manipulated as the servant Bill, he left the dungeon corridor, knowing that this time he needed to act in a completely different way. The young master concluded that the only viable option left was for him to personally bait those traitorous knights out. A few drops of water began to fall, echoing softly against the damp walls of the sewer. Two figures wearing dark cloaks moved stealthily through the long, abandoned tunnel. One of the two intruders felt it was strange that there was no trace of Nuz's gang members around. The hooded man pointed his index finger forward, hinting at something unusual at the end of the hallway. He was surprised to discover that all the iron cells that once held kidnapped slaves were completely empty. They complained about the delayed bribes and being abruptly summoned to this meeting by the old bandit boss. The intruder opened a large, crude door, wondering if the new bandit boss intended to break the deal with them. Stepping through the entrance, the two criminals stopped dead in their tracks and gasped in shock. The servant Bill was forcing an awkward smile, trembling as he tried to hide his extreme panic. Shivering out of sheer terror, he gestured with his hands and politely invited the two guests inside. One of the two disguised knights immediately grew suspicious upon seeing one of Nir's henchmen dressed like a house servant from a manor. He noticed the man was unarmed, but also caught the servant's legs trembling uncontrollably out of nervousness. The two criminals exchanged a quick, silent, complicit glance. Deciding to venture deeper into the darkroom, they drew the sharp swords hidden under their cloaks and stepped fully into the secret hideout. The hooded knight entered the darkroom with a cold glare, trying to identify who was lurking in the shadows. In front of them, a mysterious figure sat with crossed arms at the head of a large wooden table. He mockingly asked if the person here was Nir's new boss, who had summoned them without even offering proper hospitality. The man threatened, "The fake leader must think he's got 9 lives to dare treat us like this." The mysterious figure asked only a single question, leaving the two intruders completely paralyzed with shock. They instantly became hyper-vigilant upon realizing that calm voice belonged to a child. His face was illuminated by the candlelight. The young boy calmly asked why they were acting so violently. One of the two knights began breaking out in a cold sweat under his hood as he clearly recognized the person sitting before them. Suddenly, one of them fell straight to his knees on the floor, leaving his companion standing next to him utterly confused. The guard asked about his action, but the kneeling warrior desperately shouted, ordering him to get on his knees. He asked his comrade if he was an idiot for not recognizing the grand and important identity of the young boy present. The knight bowed his head in complete submission, declaring it was a great honor to meet him again in this place. The young master stood up calmly with a smirk and asked if they wanted something to drink. By calling out their real names, the young master made Sir Fickle and Sir Randolph tremble in utter terror in the dark. Everything had started a little earlier in an isolated cabin in the middle of the frozen forest. Inside, a man excitedly held a bag full of gold they had just obtained. He praised the skills of the late Nirs for making money so easily like that. The other guy held a gold coin in his hand, thrilled that this money was enough to buy food and firewood for an entire month. Hearing that, his partner said they could even replace his old sword and still have money left over. He began tossing gold coins to his partner while laughing out loud at their good luck tonight. But their joy didn't last long as heavy footsteps and a mysterious boot appeared at the entrance. A voice from the dark ordered them to freeze immediately, startling the two criminals. Kyle appeared right before them, revealing that he had just overheard their entire conversation about the money. The man panicked, frantically trying to hide the bag of money on the table with desperate gestures. With a threatening glare, Kyle asked what exactly they thought they were doing. Back in the present, Isaac calmly drank his tea while listening to the explanation from the two guards. Sitting at the head of the table, the young master admitted that they indeed had their reasons. He said his father was an extremely strict man who only acted as the shield of the North. They admired his honor, but couldn't sit idly by and watch their soldiers suffer from hunger and cold. Left with no other choice, they decided to extort the bandits to make up for the resource shortage and protect the land. Fickle agreed enthusiastically, saying that was indeed their plan from the very start. The young master listened to it all with his eyes closed, preparing to deliver his final verdict. He opened his sharp, cold blue eyes and coldly sentenced Sir Fickle and Sir Randolph, plunging them into utter despair. Isaac declared that the punishment for their crimes was certain death. He warned that they would be handed over to the court-martial, as his father would hand down the exact same judgment. Fickle lost his patience, slamming the table and asking if the young boy really didn't understand their pain. The soldier looked back in fury and concluded that a brat like him would never understand their suffering. He asked Isaac if he had ever felt extreme hunger or watched his comrades fall in the cold without proper weapons. The young master looked at him without emotion and answered very bluntly that he had never experienced that. Isaac stood up and said Fickle was merely making up empty excuses for his own mistakes. The young master questioned the kidnapping of civilians, and Fickle quickly blamed Nears for acting alone. The young boy still looked at the two traffickers with an extremely strict, overwhelming gaze. Isaac asked if he truly believed he hadn't crossed the unforgivable line just like the bandits. Fickle completely snapped upon realizing the young master wouldn't show them any mercy. He clenched his fists in rage, realizing how stupid he was to expect sympathy from this young boy. The traitor ordered Randolph to stand up so they could fight like true swords of Gerda. With a ferocious glare, Fickle drew his metal sword, ready to eliminate the young master on the spot. He pointed the sharp blade toward Isaac, swearing to strike down anyone who stood in his way. Randolph panicked at his partner's frantic attitude and begged him to reconsider. Fickle replied that the commander still had another young master, and they had to eliminate this threat right away. As tension filled the room, the young boy continued to observe their reactions coldly. Right then, Randolph drew his sword, and a powerful blue spiritual energy began to envelope the blade. The knight stepped forward with heavy strides, channeling aura into his boots. The young master tracked the soldier's movements, seemingly a bit curious about the situation. Fickle smiled, believing his partner had finally decided to help him kill the young boy. He focused all his attention on attacking Isaac, completely unaware of what his partner was about to do. Randolph looked at his old friend with a deep, sorrowful gaze, wondering how things had come to this. He felt nostalgic thinking that initially, all their actions were truly for the sake of Gerda, but he realized the path they were walking had turned far too dark. Hesitating to use his blade, the soldier lowered his head, wondering if they could still call this loyalty. Randolph bit his lip hard as he made an extremely difficult decision regarding their fate. He stood up to face his friend and asked if he still remembered the oath they had taken before. The man recalled the vow. If one was the sword, the other would be the shield. Randolph remembered Carlson's advice that a perfect sword that could cut through anything without breaking was a masterpiece. But he understood that the situation had completely changed once the warrior strayed from his original path. He warned that if this masterpiece developed its own will, it would ultimately become a monstrous, terrifying sword. Fickle was completely shocked when blocked by his ally and asked what the hell he thought he was doing. The two brothers in arms began exchanging fierce blows as their blades clashed violently. Randolph confessed that he could only understand the painful truth. After losing an ear, he screamed at Fickle that the prisoner Carlson was completely right about the corruption swallowing them up. Fickle broke into a cold sweat as he realized the comrade he had survived countless battles with had truly turned his back on him. He tried to convince Randolph to stop this madness, warning that the heir young master would take his life. Randolph firmly replied that if that happened, it was merely a tragedy they had brought upon themselves. He decided to speak clearly once and for all and throw the harshest truths right in his former partner's face. In the middle of the fierce fight, he slapped Fickle with the truth that the money was never just for the soldiers. He asked if the traitor really spent that massive fortune solely for the prosperity of the territory. The fight ended brutally, and silence returned to the room after the decisive blow. Back in the dungeon, Randolph explained to Isaac that this was the real reason Carlson decided to act in the past. That night revealed they only intended to kill the prisoner to silence him, but ended up being defeated by him instead. Isaac listened to everything calmly and contemptuously concluded that they were simply inferior to that warrior. The soldier admitted that Carlson could have easily finished them off right then if he wanted to. Instead, he only cut off Randolph's ear as a lesson and voluntarily let himself be caught without resistance. Crossing his arms, Isaac asked if he could escape Carlson's punishment just because he felt guilty. Randolph bowed his head in sorrow and fell completely silent. Facing this truth, he trembled with anxiety and confessed in a low voice that he was extremely worried about the future awaiting him. The man wondered what would happen to his beloved family if this whole story of betrayal was exposed. Isaac looked at him seriously and said a knight must understand the consequences better than anyone. Randolph trembled in panic at the boy's coldness, feeling the crushing weight of his past choices. In the corner of the room, the servant Bill was lugging the bag containing Fickle's body while desperately thinking of an escape. Isaac kept his eyes fixed on the prisoner, and began mapping out a strategic plan to resolve the situation. He called Sir Randolph in an authoritative tone that instantly caught the knight's attention. The heir young master asked directly if he was willing to atone for his severe sins in a different way. With the knight's consent, the official account of the incident began to be rewritten by the young master. The new version clearly stated that Randolph and Fickle only dealt with Nears to get emergency supplies for the army. The report pointed out that Fickle had acted alone out of greed, running the smuggling ring and kidnapping the manor's maidservants. It also recorded that when the plan failed, the traitor tried to sell Isaac to foreigners, and used the boy as a hostage, but the vicious plot was thwarted in time thanks to the heroic actions of a special figure. The official report declared that the loyal knight Randolph was the one who saved the heir and stopped the criminal. Thanks to that, all the horrible blame was pinned entirely on the dead Fickle. The traitor's body was put on public display in the town square before the people as a warning to everyone. Wrapped in a dark cloak covering his face, Randolph witnessed the punishment meted out to his former partner. The knight walked silently through the village streets under the watchful eyes of the surrounding villagers. Afterward, Isaac met his father in the luxurious, majestic reception room of the Go family manor. While sipping hot tea, the boy thought that the severe lack of resources was the real root cause of the betrayal. The terrible scarcity of basic necessities was the harsh, cruel reality the Go family had to face every single day. They guarded the northern border and received annual taxes from the royal family. This was their main source of income. However, the major issue was that this royal tax grant had dropped sharply year after year. Even so, the Go family couldn't complain to the king, nor could they independently enrich themselves. All this suffering happened due to the actions of Zeke von Go, the mad mage who had burned the imperial capital to the ground in the past. The ancestral cursed legacy had ruined the family's reputation and glory forever. Since no one could defeat the insane mage, the king submitted to the emperor, and Zeke was ultimately slain by a knight. Afterward, the kingdom became a vassal state, and the Go family lost their ducal title, leaving them merely as counts. Exiled to the barren north, any attempt to accumulate wealth would be viewed with extreme suspicion. The royal family would view it as treason, making maintaining the status quo the safest way to survive. However, Isaac calmly thought that this hasty conclusion might be a huge mistake on their part. The boy warned his father and advisors that this outdated way of thinking was merely an unfounded assumption. The count's eyes widened in surprise as he realized the boldness and immense wisdom behind his son's words. Isaac explained that the kingdom's finances were weakening year after year, and the shield tax grant would continue to drop accordingly. He asked whether the king was genuinely suspicious or simply relieved to see the Go family being self-sufficient. The young master decided to be direct and expose the clearest truth regarding the territory's actual financial problem. Isaac asserted that the real barrier was never the royal ban, but the fact that they had never bothered to find a solution. Isaac reminded them that they were completely surrounded by barren lands and dangerous hostile forces. The count fell into deep thought over his son's arguments, resting his chin on his hand. He acknowledged the boy's idea had merit, but demanded he present something concrete to solve the crisis. The head of the house clasped his hands together and warned that such a proposal was only valuable if accompanied by an actionable plan. With sharp eyes, he asked directly if the boy had the ability to deliver this saving answer. Isaac maintained a steady posture, his bright blue eyes showing he knew exactly what he had to do. The young master extended his hand and declared with absolute confidence that they must start acting without further delay. The boy revealed that the first crucial turning point was decisively cutting all ties with the old church. He explained that the church's harsh dogmas were holding the family back from prospering and creating actual wealth. The count grew tense at the bold proposal and warned that the Vatican would not sit idly by and accept this rebellion. The boy clenched his fist with determination and agreed that this was precisely why they needed a flawless excuse. Isaac flashed a sly smile and assured that he already had the ideal method to create an indisputable pretext. Facing that impressive revelation, the count turned to Schiller, seeking his wise counsel. The head butler took a sip of tea and wondered if all these brilliant ideas truly came from Isaac's head. Schiller praised the boy with admiration, saying it was hard to believe he possessed so much wisdom while still struggling with his mana. Impressed by the turn of events, the count rose from his armchair to observe his son's next moves. Through the manor window, he watched Isaac calmly strolling in the garden alongside his new allies. The boy walked with Kyle while discussing preparations to permanently weaken the church's influence. The count watched the scene from afar with a contemplative gaze. Proud of his heir's early maturity, he placed his hand on the cold glass while thinking of the bright destiny awaiting the family. Schiller maintained his usual elegant composure while observing his master's quiet thoughts. The conversation between father and son drew to a close, leaving behind an air of conviction that major changes were on the horizon. A few days later, south of the scorched city, a mysterious carriage was traveling along the road heading toward a church. The vehicle came to a sudden halt in front of the ancient temple, while a hooded figure was patiently waiting. A man wrapped in a dark cloak holding a bright lantern stepped forward to greet the guests from the carriage. In a somber tone, the hooded figure spoke the secret password to initiate the forbidden negotiations. The coachman slowly stepped down, remaining highly alert upon hearing the cult ally's password. The guest responded with the second part of the chilling password, confirming their identity for the secret meeting. The lantern bearer nodded in agreement upon realizing he was working with the right partner. He ordered the promised goods brought over immediately to begin the horrifying dark ritual. Two hooded figures dragged a tightly bound silver-haired boy out of the carriage. The boy was shoved hard by the henchman, unable to resist due to the ropes binding his hands. The leader asked if this frail boy was truly the noble tribute they had promised for the ritual. He brought the lantern close to the hostage's face to personally verify the victim's identity. The man cracked a twisted, terrifying smile as he relished the victory of the ruthless kidnapping. The light-haired boy was gagged and remained silent, showing no signs of panic before the cultists. The kidnapper ordered the servant to bring out the actual valuable reward promised in the agreement. He arrogantly assured that the terrifying fire goddess would open her arms to welcome this noble tribute. The group began leading the young victims deep inside the dark temple where they would conduct the ritual. An old woman wrapped in a dark cloak welcomed the group and said everything was proceeding according to the goddess's will. Afterward, she turned around and used a mysterious tone to request everyone follow her inside the ancient temple. Bill, disguised as the coachman, whispered in disgust about the dark cult they were about to enter. He quickly adjusted his voice and commanded the entire group in a low tone to keep moving forward without hesitation. Kyle and Randolph walked right behind the kidnappers, escorting young Isaac, who was pretending to be bound by ropes. The old woman held the bright lantern high to light the dark path and once again asked everyone to follow behind. The whole group descended the dark, damp stone stairs leading straight down to the cultists' basement. To maintain their cover in front of the cultists, Randolph placed a firm, commanding hand on Isaac's shoulder. Cullen walked with a cold, focused glare under his hood, fully prepared for any danger. He observed everything around him with extreme alertness, knowing that even a single mistake could put everyone's lives in jeopardy. Flashing back to a few days prior, during a private conversation as a hot cup of tea was served, Kyle asked if he was released thanks to exposing the knight's crimes, and Isaac confirmed that was the plan. The young master explained that rebellion was a heavy crime, so the warrior had lost his leadership position. Kyle calmly replied that he didn't even know he once held such an important position in the army. He paused for a moment before bringing the teacup to his lips. Intrigued by the boy's next words, Isaac smiled warmly and asked if he recognized this tea, revealing the drink originated from his own homeland. The warrior looked at the teacup in surprise upon realizing the young master knew his true foreign roots. Cullen set the teacup down on the table and asked directly why he didn't report him to the officials. He reminded the heir that the boy knew very well his real name wasn't Carlson. Isaac confessed that he needed to keep this secret so he could utilize his talent at the right moment. Kyle broke into a cold sweat at that revelation. Unable to comprehend what the boy was scheming, the young master advised the man to focus on his own goal. Instead of trying to guess others' thoughts, he asked if Kyle was targeting the life of the greedy old man who ruined the family he tried to build. Isaac revealed the target's name was Viscount von Bottmere, leaving the warrior utterly shocked. Kyle asked in horror how the boy knew this and why he wasn't stopping him from taking revenge. The warrior explained that his target was an important noble in this kingdom, whereas he was merely a foreigner. Isaac revealed that what he truly needed was a perfect sword possessing its own iron will. He promised that if the man lent his legendary strength, he would ensure the desired revenge would be carried out. Kyle stared silently into space, realizing this was an offer of cooperation he couldn't refuse. Back in the scorched city, a priest was screaming in the middle of the street to draw the attention of the entire populace. The fanatic roared at the top of his lungs about the terrifying threats plaguing the region. He warned that dark magic was spreading like a plague, and cultists were committing unforgivable acts of cruelty. The priest ordered everyone to seek salvation in faith rather than in a feudal lord who merely stood by doing nothing. Inside the carriage passing through the area, Kyle observed the man and commented on the old church's fanatics. Randolph complained that the church taxed the family heavily, yet continued to publicly smear Lord Gothia. Isaac interrupted the two allies' discussion, saying this topic wasn't the most important thing right now. Randolph asked nervously if the young master was completely sure about being used as bait for the ritual. The heir explained that the fanatics were seeking fame, and there was no bait more enticing than him in the north. Kyle warned that they didn't know what deadly dangers were awaiting inside the cultists' lair. Randolph emphasized the chilling rumors about brutal rituals and asked if it was truly worth risking their lives. Isaac brushed aside the warnings and asked if the old church was indeed funding this dark cult. The boy's blue eyes gleamed with determination as he analyzed the details of the plot in his mind. Kyle commented that the money used to bribe the guards came directly from the cursed cult's treasury. The young master agreed and confirmed this was the official version they would present to the kingdom. Isaac recalled that those coins were near high quality and minted by the royal family, something a mere bandit couldn't possess. Randolph agreed that the origin of those gold coins was highly suspicious and indicated the presence of a powerful ally. Kyle speculated that only the old church could access that kind, but doubted if this proved a direct link to the cult. He wondered if the young master was really planning to cling to such a slim, meaningless hope. The main character recalled that around this time, the situation began falling into chaos across the entire Northern Territory. The dark cult began ruining the land from within through grotesque rituals that paralyzed the populace with fear. The old church was the biggest beneficiary of the widespread terror, pretending to hunt down members of the secret cult. They arrested believers and burned them publicly on pyres in the middle of town squares. Witnessing this fake divine mercy, the people began worshipping the church even more. From then on, Go's situation became unsustainable, and the nobles began complaining about the terrible absurdity. They grumbled that the church had doubled the tithe tax and even demanded soldiers for construction while they were struggling to survive. The territory began suffering financial pressure and heavier demands from the old church. Consequently, the lord of the land suffered extreme famine, and Isaac decided it was time to decisively break the compact with them. This courageous stance was merely the first step toward protecting the people and the land of Go. Back in the dark dungeon, the old woman slowly descended the stone stairs while leaning on an old cane. The old woman said everything started right here when the church burned this place down, and only 3 saints survived the great fire. She said the injured survivors saw God face to face, but Bill just wished she would shut her mouth once and for all. The woman continued her grotesque sermon, declaring that the human soul resides directly within human flesh. She explained that consuming this flesh would cause the soul to be reborn within them with all the wisdom and vitality of the sacrifice. At that moment, they witnessed many believers eating forbidden body parts in a gruesome feast to attain eternity. Bill was utterly horrified to witness the disgusting and barbaric acts unfolding right before his eyes. The old woman slammed her cane on the ground and shrieked that the prophesied tribute had finally arrived at the altar. The fanatics grew hysterical on the floor as she commanded them to eat the flesh to become as noble and pure as the victim. With a terrifying smile, the old woman introduced Isaac as the flawless soul possessing all the qualities for the feast. She opened her mouth grotesquely and ordered everyone to start eating the boy alive on the spot without a shred of mercy. Bill lost his patience, kicked the old woman flying, and said he couldn't listen to any more of this insane nonsense. He roared in frustration, asking Isaac how much more grotesque madness they had to endure in this cave. The knight stepped forward and began untying the ropes, which were merely a facade binding the young master to initiate the battle. Isaac removed his gag and breathed a sigh of relief, seeing that Bill had finally acted just as he expected. The young master calmly ordered his allies to only engage cultists who attacked them first. The cultists backed away in panic. Upon realizing those victims were actually ruthless warriors, Isaac seriously warned his partners not to forget the actual strategic plan that brought them to this place. The old woman lying on the ground shrieked in full hatred, promising a terrible curse from the goddess would fall upon the intruders. Randolph cut her off with a precise strike to the face to permanently extinguish that annoying screeching. The knight pointed his sharp weapon outward and warned the other cultists that anyone daring to take a step forward would be eliminated instantly. He assured with a terrifying glare that he would strike down any opponent before they could even feel the pain. Hearing that terrifying threat, most of the cultists panicked and fled, attempting to escape the place. Randolph was slightly surprised to see the entire mob desperately fleeing through the dark corridors of the dungeon. The henchmen ran so fast that within seconds, the entrance to the temple was completely deserted and quiet. Kyle asked if they should pursue those fleeing, but Isaac replied that the priority right now was searching the entire area. Randolph sighed heavily in exhaustion and concluded that these crazy fanatics were nothing more than a chaotic joke. Kyle knelt beside the old woman who had passed out on the floor and calmly asked if she could stand up on her own. The old woman woke up in a haze, asking where she was and begging them not to beat her, leaving Kyle curious about her reaction. Randolph asked sarcastically if she had suddenly grown old and made a mocking comment about the old woman's mental state. The old woman begged for forgiveness, mistaking Isaac for a deacon, but the boy merely called her mother in a friendly manner. The young master leaned down patiently with a gentle smile and asked where this old woman's real home was. A short while later, the whole group arrived at a humble wooden cabin located in the slums south of the scorched city. Upon stepping inside and looking up at the attic, the knights were stunned speechless by what they had just discovered. Before them was a chest overflowing with a massive pile of gleaming, high-quality money. They couldn't believe a poor, humble old woman was hiding a huge fortune in her attic. Randolph shoved his greedy partner aside and asked if they were certain this money belonged to the royal family. Isaac gave a firm nod, confirming that the loyal knight Randolph's suspicions were dead on. The boy examined the coins with meticulous care, asserting that the official seal stamped onto the metal undeniably belonged to the royal mint. He was thrilled they had secured concrete proof linking the cult to the church, but his excitement was cut short by a heavy knock at the door and a calling voice. Suddenly, the cabin door swung open, and someone announced loudly that they were stepping into the humble home. The newcomer's voice echoed through the house as he politely asked about the old woman's condition. Up in the attic, Isaac's eyes went wide with shock as he realized who that voice belonged to. The boy instantly recognized the man who had just walked in as an influential clergyman from the old church. With a sly smile playing on his face, the man used a friendly tone to ask if the ritual had been a grand success. Sitting on the bed, the old woman broke into a cold sweat, hesitating before answering the man standing before her. Trying desperately to hide her overwhelming panic, she trembled all over and babbled out a few broken sentences to deflect the visitor's attention. With eyes filled with terror, she stammered through her fear, claiming that demons had invaded the shrine and destroyed everything. The woman blurted out that ruthless creatures had desecrated the sacred altar and wiped out all the cult's followers. In her blind panic, she begged for a divine miracle, while the clergyman stood confused, demanding a clear explanation about these so-called demons. Barely able to catch her breath, she tried to play crazy by calling the man a deacon and pulling a ridiculous story out of thin air. The old woman sobbed hysterically on the bed, blubbering that her husband was beating her and desperately begging for help. The clergyman let out an impatient sigh at the pathetic act, deducing that the old woman had completely lost her mind. However, a faint creak from the wooden ceiling above caught his attention, instantly putting him on high alert. He whipped around, his suspicious glare locking onto the wooden staircase leading up to the attic. The clergyman peered up into the shadows at the top of the stairs, suspecting someone was hiding up there. Gathering magical energy in his hand, the man coldly warned that he could sense an intruder in the house. He quickly concluded in his mind that the old woman was no longer of any use, and their secrets could never be leaked. So, he intended to burn away all evidence of corruption along with every piece of property crammed into that filthy attic. Kyle watched the threat from above and warned that real demons usually hide behind a cloak of holy light. In the blink of an eye, Kyle materialized right behind the clergyman, a razor-sharp blade pressed against the traitor's throat. Trembling and dripping with cold sweat, the clergyman tried to threaten the warrior, warning him that the Vatican would avenge his death. Isaac began to slowly walk down the wooden stairs, remarking that he finally remembered who the man was. A smirk crossed the young master's face as he sarcastically greeted the traitor, stepping closer into the living room. By the next morning, the scene shifted to the majestic cathedral in the city, where the deacon was brought in bound and captive. Tied tightly to a wooden chair with heavy rope, the corrupt clergyman had no way out. Weeping in pure desperation, the prisoner began to confess that the old church had wanted to expand its influence throughout the territory. He revealed that to reach this goal, the bishop had ordered them to fabricate a fictional villain to strike fear into the populace. Thus, he had manufactured a new doctrine and manipulated impoverished vagrants into forming that horrific cult. The deacon bitterly admitted that this very scheme gave birth to the terrifying cult that had terrorized the land. Randolph commented furiously that this was the worst confession he had ever heard, asking what their next move would be. Isaac maintained a cold, thoughtful expression. Knowing that this confession was the exact pawn he needed for his chessboard, the boy decided that his advisor, Schiller, would take the prisoner to the cathedral to initiate formal negotiations. The tied-up clergyman spat on the ground and burst out laughing, boasting that the bishop would definitely punish the Goethe family severely. Without giving him another chance to speak, Isaac admitted that he was the sole mastermind behind the entire setup. So if they wanted to collect a debt, they could feel free to come find him right here. This left the fat priest completely stunned. Night fell over the territory. Inside the silent dungeon, a solitary candle flickered, casting swaying shadows across the cold stone walls. The priest paced back and forth, restlessly stamping his feet on the ground. Bound and breaking into a cold sweat, he couldn't stop thinking about how his entire plan had collapsed overnight because of a mere child. Suddenly, an agonizing pain stabbed deep into the deacon's chest, making him groan in unbearable agony. The man let out a grotesque chuckle, mocking that the young master was nothing more than a barbarian's spawn. The prisoner assured him that divine justice would strike down Isaac for his sins before he took his final breath. He could feel his strength fading as he babbled on that the bishop would surely bring down a fitting punishment upon the boy. With venom and madness burning in his eyes, the man used his last shred of strength to curse the entire Goethe bloodline. The clergyman looked down at the stab wound in his chest in sheer shock. Unable to believe his time was up, he let out one last pained groan as his mysterious hooded attacker turned and leaped away. The shadow that had just eliminated the deacon stepped out of the dungeon, with cold, silent footsteps. However, heavy footfalls blocked his escape route, and a resolute voice asked if the intruder was already planning to leave. Isaac made a grand entrance at the dungeon doorway, holding a bright lantern that cut off the attacker's path. The hooded figure froze instantly upon realizing he had walked straight into the boy's perfect trap. Isaac offered a cold smile in the dark, remarking that it was a real shame they had to meet under such tragic circumstances. The young master exposed the hooded man's true identity, calling him Bishop Lavin. At the same time, a group of soldiers had completely surrounded the building outside. Not far off, Kyle and Randolph were crouching in the trees, watching everything unfold as they spoke in hushed tones. If the young master's right, then those guys are from the old church, aren't they? Exactly. The moment they sensed things going sideways, they rushed over to silence him. I didn't expect the young master to hit the nail on the head like that. Randolph looked toward the group, his eyes darkening as he muttered, "The old church, huh? They made a fortune off Nears, yet neither I nor Fickle knew a single thing about it." Wait, that's not entirely true. It's not that we didn't know. We knew damn well it was dirty money, but we turned a blind eye and didn't ask questions. Kyle glanced over at him. Then he stood up and said, "Now that you know, don't end up miserable like Fickle. You still have a family to protect." Those words seemed to snap Randolph awake. He clenched his fists, eyes filled with newfound resolve. Seeing that, Kyle gave a satisfied nod. "Stay focused on the mission. There are 13 of them in total. Wipe them all out. Don't let a single one get in the young master's way." With that, they drew the sharp swords hanging at their waists. Back inside the room, Lavin's cold voice rang out. "You don't seem surprised to see me. Or is the Marquis's son just built different from birth?" he said, maintaining his usual benevolent smile. But at that exact moment, Isaac's eyes snapped wide. An attack came hurtling straight toward him, but luckily, Isaac dodged it at the very last second. It turned out the attack launched at Isaac was a wooden stake thrown with enough force to embed itself deep into the wall. Isaac quickly pieced it together. Did he teleport that bundle of stakes, or is that magic from a spellbook? Thinking this, he said, "I'm actually pretty surprised myself. I didn't expect you to show up in person. Why do you look as thrilled as if you just struck gold?" In response, Lavin curled his lip into a smirk. "Is that so? I'm actually quite saddened. I never thought the deacon would fall into darkness so easily, yet he still owes me a debt of gratitude. After all, he brought the seed of calamity straight to me." With those words, the man pulled another sharp stake from his side, and hurled it straight at our protagonist with blinding speed. Isaac's eyes remained razor-sharp with focus. He reached his hand forward, and in a split second, Isaac snatched the sharp stake right out of the air, driving it deep into the stone floor. Lavin's face panicked as things spiraled out of control. "How on earth can you use ice magic too?" he screamed, while Isaac simply replied with a cool demeanor, "Who knows? Maybe I just sold my soul to the devil." Lavin's expression turned ugly, but he quickly forced himself to regain a bit of composure. "Isaac, do you remember when you were born? I was the one who performed your cleansing ritual. I wasn't thrilled in the slightest. When you entered this world back then, do you study history?" Isaac shrugged and replied, "Sure do, just like everyone else." Lavin took a step forward and said, "Then you should know that your birth was a mistake. Most of the cultists here come from the border tribes, savage barbarians who wander around plundering and causing chaos. Yet your father, Count Gerda, wanted to make peace with them. Then he went and married a barbarian woman and had you. That marriage defied the heavens. So it's only natural that you were born cursed. You were never meant to exist in this world in the first place." Hearing that, a spark of anger flared in Isaac's eyes. "That's rich, especially coming from the mouth of someone trying to take my life." Across from him, Lavin kept his mocking smile intact. "Do you know that those cultists often use these stakes for human sacrifices? Complete barbarians. Today, you will die by their very weapons. That way, the tie between Gerda and those barbarians will be severed, and this land will finally be cleansed." The moment he finished speaking, several more sharp stakes shot straight toward Isaac. Isaac focused his mana into the palm of his hand. 2 razor-sharp shards of ice materialized in his hands. Thanks to that, the protagonist effortlessly parried Lavin's relentless onslaught. This left Lavin visibly rattled, thinking to himself, "That's no ordinary ice." He struck every single flying stake with absolute precision. How is that even possible? This was all thanks to the rigorous training Isaac had undergone with Lucas in his past life. After getting knocked back by Lucas, the protagonist gasped for air and said, "Lucas, let's call it a day. I'm completely out of breath." Lucas teased him in a playful tone. "Tired already?" Isaac fired back, "Tired? It's been almost an hour." Lucas extended a hand to pull Isaac up while saying, "Still, your swordsmanship has improved. Before, you couldn't even block a single strike of mine, but today you parried 5 in a row." The protagonist shook his head softly. "It's all thanks to your amazing instruction. Why don't you go register as a knight? Staying by my side is just wasting your talent. He smiled and replied, give me a break. My swordsmanship is pretty average. What's truly impressive is your imagination, young master. Returning to reality, attacks kept flying toward Isaac without pause. Yet, Isaac deflected every single one of them. Mid-combat, he thought to himself, why did I suddenly remember his words? Lucas didn't elaborate back then, but now I get what he meant. This imagination was born from the days I was confined indoors. Since I couldn't see the outside world, my inner senses grew razor-sharp. During those long hours of daydreaming, I fought Lucas countless times in my mind, from visualizing magic I couldn't yet cast to painting an impossible future. It was those endless mental battles that forged who I am today. Across from him, Lavan unleashed another fierce attack. Seeing this, Isaac swung his hand to counter. The two attacks collided mid-air, triggering a massive explosion. Isaac thought to himself, Lucas, you really were a great teacher. By now, Lavan had run completely out of wooden stakes. However, Isaac didn't lower his guard for a second. Surely that's not all you've got? For someone who made bishop, relying on a spellbook just to throw stakes makes you look nothing like a man of God. Hearing those words, Lavan gritted his teeth in pure rage. To avoid exposing my signature technique, I held back from using divine power directly, but now I have no choice. He slammed the book in his hand onto the ground and focused his magic into his palm. Open your eyes and look closely. This is the divine power granted to me, holy flame. Isaac looked up with wide eyes, and saw a massive blue fireball hovering in mid-air. However, that only left our protagonist even more bewildered. This is holy flame? Lavan gave a proud nod. Precisely. This cleansing flame is something mediocre mages couldn't copy even in their wildest dreams. Against this, those ice crystals of yours will vaporize in. Before he could finish his sentence, Isaac cut in. Are you talking about this? At that exact moment, an identical fireball erupted in Isaac's palm, throwing the fat bishop into sheer utter confusion, unable to comprehend what was happening. Lavan refused to accept reality and demanded furiously, how on earth did you create that flame? Isaac answered in a perfectly calm voice, it's simple, really. Just create fire and compress it twice. That's all. This sent Lavan further into disbelief. Are you mocking me? Power doesn't work that way. In response, Isaac decided to enlighten the old man. Maybe that's true for the old church's power, but it seems I'm a heretic, because my magic is dual elemental. That's the sole reason I can pull this off. The moment he finished speaking, the flame in his hand flared up far wilder than before, shifting into a deep, dark purple. Watching this unfold made Lavan's eyes nearly pop out of his sockets. Absurd! How is this possible? There's no way a power like that would be granted to someone with filthy blood. Isaac extinguished the magic in his hand and said, oh, maybe the gods just favor me a little. Those words caused Lavan's face to freeze completely. His hands began to shake uncontrollably. That's blasphemy. I spent decades honing this power. With that, he hurled the blue fireball in his hand straight at Isaac at breakneck speed. Meanwhile, the protagonist stood his ground, thinking to himself, decades? Is that right? Well, I've been mastering it for a whole lifetime. His eyes turned icy cold. He slowly raised his hand forward, and an even more terrifying pillar of purple fire erupted from his fingertips. It blasted right through the blue fireball and rushed straight toward Lavan, causing sweat to pour down the bishop's face like rain. Isaac spoke calmly, out of pity for you, Bishop, I'll let you know why you have to die. And that reason is, that word getting out about me using magic would cause way too much trouble. Just like that, Lavan took a direct hit from the magic spell. In the end, his body was charred into black ash. As for Isaac, he coughed a few times, catching his breath after that terrifying attack. Maintaining magic at this level for an extended period was still a bit too much for his current body. The person who arrived was Kyle, supporting Randolph, who was covered in blood from head to toe. Kyle's eyes widened slightly, as he looked at the pile of burnt ash ahead and asked, what happened here? Isaac turned to look at him with hesitation in his eyes, thinking to himself, unlike Bill, Kyle hasn't signed a contract yet. It's best to hide the fact that I can use magic. With that in mind, he made up an excuse. The deacon and the bishop got into an argument, and as you can see, they ended up killing each other. This story caught Kyle off guard. Is that so? Isaac played along with equal suspicion, having no intention of pressing further. Meanwhile, Kyle stopped questioning and reported, I've cleared out the paladins outside. Isaac nodded, but then fell back into deep thought, and asked, what about Randolph? Kyle glanced over at Randolph and replied, he asked me to take care of his family. Time flew by under a gloomy, gray sky. Randolph's funeral was held. Even the head of the house made an appearance to pay his respects. In another corner, Randolph's wife and 2 sons were weeping in deep sorrow. From a distance, Isaac observed quietly and asked, "How did Randolph die?" "We should at least let his family know," Kyle answered. "Those paladins were tough, but Randolph could have survived if I had gone all out." Those words left Isaac silent for a moment. After a few seconds, he asked, "Are you saying you didn't?" "I had to play the role of an ordinary soldier until I killed that guy," Kyle replied. However, this made Isaac view things differently. "Meaning you chose to stay hidden until you got your revenge, even if it meant sacrificing a close friend's life." On his end, Kyle continued to give Isaac a fair warning. "I'm telling you this so you can mentally prepare yourself, young master. If you ever end up in a similar situation down the road, I will still act the exact same way." He spoke with an utterly serious look on his face. Isaac turned to him and asked, "Even if I'm the one helping you get your revenge?" Kyle reaffirmed, "Yes. The day I reveal my full strength will only be that day." Isaac understood that the day Kyle spoke of was the day he would reclaim his blood debt under his true identity as Kyle, not Carlson. Thinking this, he simply said calmly, "I see, both you and I are people who don't deserve to attend a proper funeral anyway." Time kept rolling on. The scene shifted inside a moving carriage, where Isaac and his father were having a brief conversation. His father spoke first. "Preparations for negotiations with the Holy See are complete. In exchange for turning a blind eye to the bishop's crimes, they won't collect the 10% tax anymore, nor will they send a new bishop here. However, it's hard to tell how long they'll keep their word. But for now at least, Gerda has broken free from the old church's mess, just as you calculated." Isaac gave a slight nod. Inside, he felt a small swell of satisfaction. Good, the obstacle's been removed. Time to prep for the next step. On his end, Count Gerda continued, "The next time Carlson comes around, I'll give him a proper compliment. For now, let's talk about something else." He took a deep breath to compose himself. He laced his 10 fingers together and confessed, "I had absolutely no idea about any of it. From how brutal the cult's ritual was, to them bringing 13 paladins along, to the bishop himself being the founder of that twisted cult just to carry out such depraved acts. I was completely in the dark. While you knew everything, I didn't suspect a thing. What in the world did you go through? Before I left for Winterband, you were just a weak, somewhat unusual child, but now I can't even begin to guess what's going on in your head." Isaac remained silent in the face of this confession. After a few seconds, he spoke up, "I was simply considering what's best for our family." In that moment, he seemed to shift back into the old Isaac, the one who had witnessed his family's ruin. Meanwhile, Gerda stared at him in silence. Before speaking up, "Isaac, I married Adele when I was only 14. Back then, we didn't even share a language. From culture and habits to our way of thinking, we were total strangers. She was a wild girl. That period was absolute hell for both of us, since we were nothing more than tools used to extinguish a war between two sides. But precisely because of that, Adele and I made a promise to each other that we would never turn our children into tools for the family. Even though the true meaning of this life remains a mystery, we swore to help you kids live a life that's truly your own. Truth be told, I thought I'd have to wait until you grew up a bit more before telling you this. Who could have guessed you'd mature so quickly? Looking at your face, I bet you're wondering why I'm telling you all this, aren't you?" He reached out and ruffled Isaac's hair, offering a word of advice. "It means you have every right to live carefree and just be an ordinary child." Isaac quietly pursed his lips and nodded in agreement. "Yes, father." Meanwhile in the forest, a large man was rushing over to report to his leader. "Boss, we got a letter from Gerda." The bald guy flinched. "A letter? Hand it over. Let me see." He snatched the letter and threw it straight into the campfire in front of him. "I was running out of firewood anyway. This came in handy." His subordinate yelled out in panic, "Wait, boss, why'd you burn it?" The leader roared, "Shut your mouth. That piece of trash isn't worth a single penny. No matter how many times they send him, those bastards will never become the masters of this land." Arthur called Isaac and Carlson over, saying they both had done a fantastic job. He summoned them to praise their efforts. He first turned to Carlson and asked if he had any requests. Carlson replied that he wanted to continue serving young Master Isaac. Arthur pointed out that if Carlson returned to Winterband, he could be promoted to squad commander. Carlson calmly answered that instead of chasing titles, he wanted to find a place where his skills would be put to the absolute best use. Tapping his fingers on the desk in deep thought, Arthur muttered to himself before agreeing that if that was Carlson's wish, they would go with it. Turning to Isaac, Arthur noted that he had no objections either. Isaac replied that he would feel much safer with Carlson as his bodyguard. Arthur accepted the request, officially appointing Carlson as Isaac's personal bodyguard and granting him 200 dinarons. Carlson bowed respectfully in thanks. Arthur then turned to Isaac with a grave expression, saying it was now Isaac's turn to state what he wanted. Isaac answered thoughtfully that he wanted Fickelsland. Staring at him in utter shock, Arthur asked if he was talking about Winfeld. The scene shifted to a sword sparring match, where the clashing sound of two wooden swords echoed out. Isaac was gradually overwhelmed, losing his balance and falling flat on his back. Carlson commented that Isaac blocked the strikes pretty well, but still lacked the strength to hold his ground. After wiping the sweat from his face, Carlson gave Isaac a stern look and asked why he had suddenly asked for a sparring match. Isaac replied that he intended to take over Winfeld. Carlson asked what Isaac planned to do once he got his hands on Winfeld. Isaac answered that Carlson didn't need to know the details, only that it would help him carry out his revenge. Hearing those words, Carlson was caught off guard for a second. The two got back into stance. Isaac gripped his wooden sword tightly and charged forward with cold, sharp eyes. Deep down, Isaac resolved that it was time to start over. As Isaac launched his attack, Carlson thought to himself in surprise that he had heard Isaac had never learned swordsmanship, yet his sword technique was strangely fluid and refined. As they continued to clash, Carlson observed mentally that Isaac's strikes were neither exceptionally sharp nor extraordinarily fast, but both his offense and defense were insanely precise. While parrying Isaac's attacks, Carlson thought that reaching this level of skill was only possible if Isaac had been holding a sword since he was 5 or 6 years old. However, after pushing Isaac back and feeling his hands tremble, he also realized Isaac's physical strength was far too weak for that to be the case. Isaac pushed himself to keep fighting despite being on the verge of total exhaustion, yet every time he collapsed, he forced himself back up. Watching this, Carlson wondered how on earth such a thing was possible. The look in Carlson's eyes gradually shifted. He no longer saw Isaac as just a child. Tightening his grip on his sword, he leaped high into the air. Sensing the danger, Isaac hurriedly backed away, but Carlson unleashed a decisive blow. The two wooden swords collided with a heavy crack as Isaac trembled, desperately trying to hold the line. Suddenly, Carlson intentionally loosened his grip, letting his sword slide off to the side. Isaac lost his balance, and in that split second, Carlson delivered a brutal kick right into Isaac's ribs. Isaac cried out in pain before collapsing onto his side. Carlson coldly remarked that with Isaac's current skill level, he wouldn't even survive in Winfeld. Isaac shot back that was precisely why he asked Carlson to teach him. Carlson's face turned even colder as he said, "You can use magic, can't you?" He recalled Isaac's story about the deacon and the bishop killing each other, concluding that the deacon actually wasn't strong enough to defeat the bishop. Isaac immediately asked how Carlson knew that. Carlson explained that once a person reaches a certain level, whether through magic or aura, they can accurately gauge an opponent's true strength. Isaac offered a slight smile and asked if Carlson was really comfortable admitting he had reached that level. He added that he thought Carlson was hiding his true abilities. Carlson frowned and replied that Isaac had known the truth the moment he wiped out those paladins. After a brief hesitation, Isaac explained that since there were no eyes or ears around, he could speak freely. He admitted that using magic would certainly make things easier for a while, but it would leave the Goethe family politically isolated because his unique constitution was identical to a certain 10th-tier mage. Intrigued, Carlson asked if Isaac was referring to Sieg von Goethe. Isaac confirmed it. He explained that Sieg von Goethe was the only recorded 10th-tier mage in history, and historical records noted that he also suffered from mana explosion. According to those records, Sieg collected magical artifacts from across the continent and wore them on his person, seemingly overcoming his constitution in his own way. Isaac then asked what that implied for himself. Carlson answered helplessly that the fact Isaac could use magic was proof that he too had overcome that constitution, just like Sieg von Goethe had in the past. Isaac lowered his head and urged Carlson to think through the situation. He pointed out that over a century had passed since Sieg von Goethe burned down the royal capital. Yet someone with that exact same constitution was born once again into the Goethe family and had also overcome it. Isaac asked if Carlson truly believed the royal family and other noble houses would leave the Goethe family in peace. Inside, Carlson concluded that they definitely wouldn't. Instead, they would either exploit the Goethe family for political gain or assassinate Isaac. Isaac slowly stood up and asked Carlson if he regretted joining the Goethe family. Carlson gave a small nod, admitting that he did, but declared that he had never once looked back. He warned Isaac that the one who would truly regret it was Isaac himself, since he was the one who asked to spar. Isaac immediately panicked and protested, saying they should wait a second since he thought the match was already over. Isaac was sitting inside the carriage. Schiller asked if leaving for Winfeld without saying a word was really fine, remarking that Hans and Gisela would definitely be sad. Isaac replied that Schiller wasn't usually the type to worry about such things and asked why he was bringing it up now. Schiller answered that it was because Isaac himself cared. Without turning his head, Isaac thought to himself that when he ignited the purple flames, he felt his body could barely take any more. He admitted to himself that he still couldn't fully control the mana explosion. He then explained out loud that it was better to let Hans and Gisela be sad than to end up dead, because he didn't want even the slimmest chance of getting them killed. Elsewhere, Carlson was riding his horse through a desolate wasteland. He explained that Winfeld, formerly known as Fickle Territory, had become a land contaminated by monster blood, where nothing could sprout or grow. He added that this was also the front line facing any enemy that managed to cross Winterband. Hearing this, Isaac thought to himself that this description matched the exact state of the territory he had witnessed in his past life. Suddenly, Isaac's eyes widened as the ground began to tremble violently. Schiller shouted out that a horn was blowing, a signal that monsters had appeared. A guard outside immediately opened the carriage door and urgently warned young Master Isaac that monsters had shown up, ordering him not to step outside and to stay put inside the carriage. The moment Isaac saw the person standing outside, he gasped in utter disbelief, asking why on earth Hans was. Amidst the snow-covered forest, the carriage procession trudged forward. Isaac suddenly called out to Hans. He wondered why the old butler was being so stubborn about dragging himself along to such a dangerous place. Hans could only let out a silent sigh. Isaac stared at Hans with eyes full of suspicion. Hans scratched his head frantically to explain, saying he was being hounded and harassed day and night by someone, which was why he had no choice but to take shelter with the young master. Carlson snapped to full alertness, proudly declaring he would protect Isaac at all costs. Isaac could only sigh in exasperation, rubbing his forehead at his subordinate's overwhelming enthusiasm. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed as a massive dark shadow landed on the snow right beside the carriage procession. It was an ambush by a pack of hellhounds. Carlson instantly roared orders for the guards to form a battle line. Hideous, glowing red eyes gradually emerged from the darkness. It was the hellhound, a notorious monster species that specialized in hunting in the Winfeld region. Bessemer noted that these beasts were extremely clever, always prioritizing the weakest targets first. A powerful stomp sent snow flying everywhere, obscuring the entire area. Bessemer drew his sword, eyes glued to the enemy as he prepared for the clash. He was hyper-focused, watching for every single opening in the monster's movements. Despite the defensive line, a giant hellhound lunged straight for Isaac's carriage. Carlson shouted out a warning. Before Carlson and Isaac could even process what was happening, the dark shadow blotted out their entire view. Isaac quickly grabbed Hans by the shoulder, pulling the old man back to protect him. The monster's maw, bristling with razor-sharp teeth, slammed directly into the carriage cabin. A deafening crunch echoed out as the carriage was completely pulverized in the blink of an eye. Isaac and Hans were hurled onto the freezing ground, surrounded by debris. Isaac cried out in pain. Forcing himself through the agony, he scrambled to his feet among the wreckage. Isaac looked around in panic, calling out Hans's name in desperation. He feared he might lose yet another important person if things kept going like this. Suddenly, a sound came from under a pile of splintered wood. Isaac strained his eyes to look. Hans dragged himself out of the debris with great difficulty, groaning nonstop from the impact. He weakly answered Isaac, saying he was still there and completely fine. Carlson was down on his knees, fresh red blood oozing from a wound on his face. Isaac unexpectedly landed a straight punch right on Carlson's face for letting himself get hurt. Despite the painful punch, Carlson let out a helpless chuckle. He admitted that young Master Isaac's punch was actually way stronger than he had imagined. Isaac clenched his fists, glaring at Carlson with eyes full of reproach. Carlson froze, lowering his head, not daring to look Isaac in the eye. The guard earnestly apologized for letting the young master fall into such grave danger. Isaac let out a sigh of relief seeing that both Hans and Carlson were safe. He told Carlson to get up. Bessemer led his horse over. Isaac asked if he had finished off the monster from earlier. He wondered about the rest of the pack. Bessemer stammered, trying to say something. Isaac heard loud battle cries echoing from a distance. He was curious about what was happening over there. Not far away, a chaotic battle was unfolding. The Hellhound pack was completely overwhelmed by a group of strangers. Bessemer explained that those were the warriors of Winfeld, and it seemed they had finished clearing out the beasts for the convoy. Isaac froze when he realized those warriors were fighting completely shirtless. A giant Winfeld warrior swung his axe, cleanly slicing through a lunging hellhound. He slaughtered the beasts while laughing hysterically, a truly terrifying display of madness. Watching the bloodthirsty warriors tear the monsters apart, Isaac could only mutter that they were a bunch of lunatics. It was an incomprehensible level of madness right in the middle of this harsh land. Bessemer explained that the big guy standing over there was the commander of the Winfeld camp. Most of the soldiers here, including himself, hailed from a ruthless warrior tribe. Hearing this, Isaac could only repeat the name under his breath. A shirtless giant, wielding an axe dripping with monster blood, strolled lazily toward Isaac's group. Hans hurriedly clarified that he was the family treasurer, not a relative of this giant man. Hans pressed the commander, asking if he had received the letter announcing their trip. The commander asked back blankly, "What letter?" clearly having tossed those papers into the trash without bothering to read a single word. He loomed closer, leaning down to inspect Isaac thoroughly, feeling like the face was somewhat familiar. He smirked, mockingly asking Bessemer if he had just brought along a kid who was on the verge of tears. Carlson demanded that he watch his mouth, but the commander was only busy marveling at how fast time flew, noting that Isaac looked just like his mother. Isaac's face hardened upon hearing this stranger judge him with such a condescending attitude. Isaac didn't care about what the guy was saying, he simply demanded coldly that he put some clothes on before talking any further. All around, soldiers were busy clearing away monster carcasses and moving the wounded toward the camp. Hans spoke up, asserting that from now on, Isaac was the rightful lord of this Winfeld territory. The commander sat down on a log, his expression indifferent as if he couldn't care less about Isaac's lordly title. He casually brought up how Isaac's mother had met a tragic end, noting that the kid didn't seem grieving at all. Hans asked Isaac worriedly if he really wanted to stay in this harsh, danger-ridden place. The commander scratched his head, saying he still felt something was off in his gut. He suddenly raised his hand, pointing a thick finger straight at Isaac. He asked out loud if this was the useless cursed child that everyone had been whispering about. He turned to look at Bessemer, waiting for a confirmation of his suspicion. His eyes narrowed with pure malice as he glared down at the little young master. He burst into a loud, booming laugh upon realizing he had guessed right, a laugh dripping with contempt. The giant's hand tightened around the handle of his heavy iron axe. He advised Isaac that he'd better get the hell out while he was still feeling nice, because there was no room here to babysit a foolish kid. He hoisted the massive axe onto his shoulder, casting an oppressive, invisible pressure over everyone around. Bessemer hurriedly called out to the commander as he saw the situation taking a turn for the worse. The giant shot Isaac a cold, disdainful glare. Isaac stood his ground, declaring that if the guy dared to kick him out, this camp would soon be wiped off the map anyway. Because the Wolf King is coming, Isaac's sentence caused the surrounding atmosphere to instantly freeze over. The commander paused, looking at Isaac with eyes full of suspicion. He demanded to know what a wet-behind-the-ears kid like Isaac could possibly know about battle. His hand gripped the axe handle so hard his veins bulged with rage. A wind-cleaving axe blow rushed forward, its pressure forcing Isaac to squint as the gust hit his face. The blade stopped just millimeters from Isaac's face. The commander roared that he had slain countless wolf kings, so Isaac had better know his place and shut his mouth. The commander's gaze blazed with fury, ready to crush anyone who dared challenge his authority. Yet Isaac maintained his cold blue eyes, not even blinking once in the face of the deadly blade. "Carlson! Lower your weapon," Isaac ordered nonchalantly, as if that blade meant nothing. Only then did everyone realize in shock that Carlson had silently appeared behind the commander, pressing a sword against his neck without anyone noticing. Carlson glared at the giant with razor-sharp eyes, filled with absolute loyalty toward his master. Carlson softly replied, "Understood," and slowly eased his sword back, bringing a heart-stopping standoff to an end right in the middle of the snowy forest. The commander was stunned, unable to believe Carlson could close the distance so fast without him noticing. Isaac used his hand to gently push away the axe blade pressed against his face, casually telling Bessemer that whether he believed it or not was up to him. His eyes gleamed with firm resolve as Isaac affirmed he wouldn't show mercy to anyone who dared stand in the way of him protecting his territory. The giant looked at Isaac with a completely changed expression, realizing that the blood of true, great warriors was indeed running through this kid's veins. "I am Isaac von Goethe," he declared his name loudly while decisively unsheathing his sword from its scabbard. Isaac reminded him of his status as the heir to the bloodline of Adele, daughter of the warrior tribe's renowned grand chieftain. The dual challenge rang out, causing Hans standing nearby to break into a cold sweat out of fear for his young master's safety. Isaac coldly affirmed what he would do immediately after defeating the tall commander. Drawing his sword completely, Isaac declared he would take supreme command over this entire Winfeld camp. Isaac's sharp sword tip pointed directly at the commander, leaving him utterly speechless before the young lord's overwhelming aura. A heavily bearded, muscular man loomed in front of the camp, a sinister grin spreading across his scarred face. He mocked the boy standing before him, calling him a fool seeking his own death for daring to provoke him. The gray-haired guard flinched in horror as he saw the white-haired young master accept the brute's provocation without a second thought. He called out the man's name to warn him, but it was already too late to stop what had been set in motion. The tall warrior pointed a finger at the sky, declaring the duel would take place at high noon the following day. When the sun reached its peak over the camp once more, the young master's cold blue eyes locked onto the giant man standing before him. Despite the looming danger, he still offered to let him sleep in his tent for the night, treating this face-off like just another day at the office. The two stood facing each other beneath the barren winter trees. The brute told him straight up that if he wanted to run, this was his last chance. But the boy's expression didn't flicker in the slightest. That night, the old soldier stepped inside the tent to confront the young master, demanding to know why he had provoked such a dangerous man. An elite officer with eyes as sharp as knives spoke up, revealing a crucial detail. The man named Bessemer was no ordinary soldier, he was a berserker. The officer explained that berserkers were infamous for their uncontrollable rage, which usually led to an early grave. Yet Bessemer had defied that fate and outlived most of his kind. The young master was calmly sharpening his sword when asked if he truly grasped the gravity of that fact. He replied that surviving as a berserker meant Bessemer possessed more than raw strength, he had the discipline to restrain it with patience and judgment. The old soldier's face was tight with anxiety. He admitted the young master clearly understood the danger, but still asked why he had deliberately jumped into it. Outside the tent, two other soldiers, Hans and Carlson, stood uneasily. A voice called out to them, urging them to speak up against the young master's reckless decision. Hans hesitated, remaining silent while someone else patted his head in disdain. Unmoved, the young master dismissed them to rest, saying he needed to sleep before tomorrow's duel and telling Hans to bring Schiller along tomorrow. Hans turned pale, stammering out an apology. He clearly wanted to protest further but didn't know what to say. The young master cut him off coldly, telling him he was standing in the way. Hans froze, taken aback by the bluntness. The two soldiers backed out through the tent flap, disappearing into the dark night and leaving the young master alone with his thoughts. Right outside, one of the black-cloaked men whispered to himself, swearing that if the young master were truly in danger, he wouldn't just stand by and watch. Lying down to rest, the young master added one final warning of his own. Once that moment arrived, nothing anyone said would stop him from acting. The other man simply replied that it was up to him, and the two laid down on their separate beds. The tension between them remained unresolved. Later, another black-cloaked figure asked Carlson if they had set off yet. Carlson answered with a single word of confirmation, reporting that there were strange movements among the soldiers in the camp. Unbothered, the young master told him to ignore it and focus solely on the task he had been assigned. Beneath the night sky, a black-haired man gave a faint nod, accepting the order without asking a single question. Morning came with jarring suddenness. The young master woke up with a start. Blood was smeared across his forehead and cheeks, his expression frozen in shock. He sat up in bed, dazed and blood-drenched, staring straight ahead in stunned silence as the bedsheets sat soaked all around him. Suspended above the bed was the carcass of a hellwolf tied to the tent beam, blood dripping steadily down onto him as he realized it had been placed there deliberately, and the ones who did it considered it nothing more than a joke. Outside, a soldier tore open the tent flap and shouted an alarm, calling for the young master as daylight flooded the ruined tent. A group of nearby soldiers laughed and joked, openly mocking him and asking if he had eaten wolf meat last night. Hans stepped forward in a fury, demanding how those who called themselves Goethe soldiers could do such a thing, only to be cut off by another voice ordering him to shut his mouth, ignoring the tense atmosphere around them. Standing up, the young master stated that the only priority right now was washing the blood off his body. Hans turned toward him, calling out his title, his face full of anxiety. Beside the water basin, the young master poured bucket after bucket of cold water over his head, washing away the blood in silence. His composure didn't falter for a second despite everything he had just been through. Standing outside the tent, Schiller questioned how those claiming to be Goethe soldiers could do something so low. Another man told him not to waste his breath, as confronting them directly would only lead to outright denials. The old commander rushed to the scene in a rage, demanding to know where Carlson had gone and what he was doing while this humiliating prank took place. Now calm beside the basin, the young master spoke up in Carlson's defense, explaining that he had merely gone to carry out a task assigned by the young master himself. Wringing out his wet hair, he maintained an eerie composure that forced the voice beside him to admit it was unbelievable how calm he remained after all of this. An old memory resurfaced, drifting back to an investigation following a dark cult's ritual, a place that had been searched to uncover the full truth behind the event. What they found was described simply as nothing short of hell, a blood-soaked scene filled with dark ritualistic markings that no one could ever forget. It was said that an ordinary child exposed to such horror would easily be driven to madness, yet the young master had walked through it all without breaking down. The old commander approached once more, finally tracking him down and calling his name as he crossed the muddy campsite. He remarked that the tent looked terrible, but seemed relieved that no serious harm had been done. The young master coldly threw his words back at him, pointing out that he was covered in filth and blood. The commander pressed further, asking if it wasn't a stroke of luck that it was only that. The butler responded with a dry question, telling him to repeat what he had just said. Carlson wondered aloud whether Winfeld truly belonged to Gerda, given that the land had originally been taken by force. His face was filled with unease as he weighed the heavy implications of that question. As a group of warriors stood under the night sky, one reminded the butler that the men only bowed their heads because His Highness was alive and well. The butler's silence was answer enough. Sitting by the bathhouse, the white-haired young master brushed the matter aside and turned to Carlson, asking for the results of the order he had given. Carlson confirmed that everything had played out exactly as the young master had predicted. Probing further, Carlson revealed that the Hell Wolf pack attacking the camp hadn't been driven solely by hunger. He asked whether the young master had intentionally tasked him with investigating them, sensing a deeper motive behind the decision. Standing alone near the wooden palisade, the young master silently pondered what reason could lie behind it all, his expression unreadable as snow swirled around him. A heavy blow cut through the air as a massive axe blade swung down, the impact echoing across the camp. The young master and his subordinates stared solemnly as the confrontation unfolded right before their eyes. The young master's sharp blue eyes narrowed as the midday drum echoed throughout the fortified camp. Standing before him on the open grounds was a towering warrior wielding a battle axe, the two facing each other down. The bald, heavily bearded giant taunted the young master for stepping forward instead of running, mocking that it still wasn't too late to turn tail and flee. Unflinching, the young master raised his sword, declaring that they first needed to agree on the rules of the duel. He proposed using the Wait tribe's ritual for choosing a leader to settle the outcome, cutting his own palm as a gesture of respect for the tradition. The giant's eyes narrowed at the sight, acknowledging that the young master had thoroughly studied tribal customs and come fully prepared for the challenge ahead. With a fierce battle cry, the giant swung his axe in a wide, powerful arc, the blade slicing through the air toward his opponent. Blood dripped from the wounded palm, a mark of the price paid before the true clash even began. The giant reached down, wrapping his massive hand around the young master's small hand. The sheer contrast between them was stark as they stood bound together before the climax of the battle. Among the onlookers, a worried subordinate asked Carlson if he planned to save the young master. He flinched when Carlson replied bluntly, "Who else is there to save?" The subordinate wrapping his bandages panicked, crying out that this was nothing short of a fight between a giant and a child, sweat pouring down his face out of fear for the outcome. Carlson turned around and coldly called him a useless subordinate, leaving the man stunned and speechless. The young master's cold, focused expression cut through the tension as he told them to shut up and just watch what was about to happen. A powerful gust tore through the trees as the giant charged, axe raised high, closing the gap across the snow-covered ground toward his smaller opponent. With a single decisive blow, the giant's massive frame was sent flying backward, slamming into the ground in a flash of light as the young master stood his ground. Having ended the duel in just one strike, the giant swung his fist and axe simultaneously in a fierce downward strike, roaring as he poured everything into a final blow to end the battle. Carlson turned to the sweating subordinate beside him and told him to watch closely as both paid rapt attention to the clash before them. Carlson pondered what kind of person his master truly was, remembering his razor-sharp resolve before the image of the young master's tear-stained face flashed in his mind. A massive explosion of dust and force tore through the ground, sending a shockwave that startled the surrounding warriors into taking cover. The subordinate stammered in disbelief as he realized what had just occurred. Steel clashed against steel, showering sparks as a giant weapon repeatedly slammed down. A young man in a dark cloak took the full brunt of the blow, sent skidding backward across the frozen ground. His sword barely held up against the crushing force. Two soldiers stood frozen at the edge of the clearing, watching the scene unfold. One turned to the other in sheer disbelief, unable to make sense of what he had just witnessed. The young master had coldly blocked Bessemer's attack, and it made no sense at all. House Gerda was famous for raising mages, not swordsmen. The bald, bearded warrior rested his massive axe against his shoulder, sizing up the boy who had just blocked his strike. He dismissed it effortlessly, muttering that it was nothing more than sheer luck. Gasping for breath, the silver-haired youth knelt on the ground, his sword still tightly gripped in hand. He repeated those words in his mind, refusing to accept them so easily. Sheer luck alone couldn't explain what had just happened, and he knew it. Tension spread rapidly through the ranks of soldiers. One called out to his comrade, demanding answers about what they had just seen the young master do, his words tumbling out frantically with shock still written across his face. Elsewhere, a black-haired man observed from a distance, a thin smirk touching the corner of his mouth. He pondered the mystery, wondering how the boy had used magic without anyone noticing its casting. The story flashed back to a month prior in a quiet training area, where the silver-haired young master stood before an elderly swordsman. His expression was grim and determined as he asked point-blank what it would take to defeat him in swordsmanship. Within the span of a single month, the two faced each other, swords in hand inside a room resembling an old chapel. The instructor answered without hesitation that it was impossible, the young master didn't stand a chance. Yet the boy pressed further, asking what would happen if losing simply wasn't an option, if he had to win at all costs. The instructor held up 3 fingers, clearly stating his conditions. 3 conditions had to be met for such a victory to be possible, and he told the young master to listen carefully. The bearded axe wielder, who would later attack him, spoke through the memory. The first condition was crystal clear: the enemy had to look down on his opponent, distracted and careless out of sheer overconfidence. The same giant knelt slightly, taking the boy's hand as if sealing a deal. The second condition followed immediately: the match needed a specific, clear victory condition, something tangible to target rather than a vague concept of winning. Back on the castle grounds, the black-haired instructor pointed straight at the young master, emphasizing the final point. The ultimate condition, he said, was the most critical. The boy needed a guaranteed execution, something that could absolute promise victory the moment an opening presented itself. The instructor added an accompanying catch: fulfilling all 3 conditions meant spending every waking hour of the month doing nothing else. Unbothered, the young master dryly remarked that his master had a roundabout way of saying something was impossible. Even so, he decided to try. Time ticked away. A blinding clash of light erupted across the training grounds. 2 forces of energy collided in a brilliant burst, sending sparks flying into the dark. In the center, the young master gripped his sword, muscles strained tight. His eyes locked onto his opponent as the impact resonated around them. Something had fundamentally shifted in the way he moved. On the ground, panic washed over the old swordsman's face as his own weapon was knocked clean out of his hand. He stared at his empty palm, demanding to know how his strike had been thrown so completely off course. The young master merely looked up at him, a flicker of knowing in his gaze. The answer was revealed piece by piece, showing the image of a gleaming blade wrapped in shimmering light. It was merely a trick, he admitted, nothing more. Defeating a trained soldier through raw skill and strength alone was simply unrealistic. But there was a catch: no one could discover he was a mage. The scene shifted deeper into a dusty private room. Standing alone, the young master flipped through the pages of a thick, ancient grimoire, quietly explaining the method he had devised to solve that exact problem. The book belonged to Bishop Leovonius, a grimoire centered around phase shift magic capable of launching lethal stakes. He described tearing the pages directly from the spine and pasting them onto the inner lining of his scabbard, hidden completely from view. The final piece fell into place through his own words: by channeling mana through the blade, the formula embedded in the grimoire would trigger upon contact. The sword itself would cast the spell, turning an ordinary blade into a weapon no one would suspect was magical. The sword floating near his hand wasn't actually being held at all. It was suspended in midair by phase shift magic, needing only to look convincing enough for anyone watching to believe his hand was doing the work. The true difficulty revealed itself the moment the plan was set in motion. The blade was literally hovering there, detached from his hand, and that alone created a problem no ordinary swordsman ever had to face. To make the sword look like it was being swung with real force, he had to move like a puppeteer pulling invisible strings, guiding a weapon that responded to magic rather than muscle. Every movement had to be shaped by a second spell layered over the first, controlling the blade's path with a precision that allowed for zero hesitation or error. The mana feeding it all had to be measured with absolute balance. Too little and the sword wouldn't move convincingly, too much and the illusion would shatter in an instant. His eyes remained locked on his opponent, tracking every subtle twitch, because the illusion could only hold if his timing perfectly matched his opponent's real movements. Facing him, the axe-wielding warrior charged, his massive frame closing the distance rapidly. The boy picked up on his opponent's foot placement, a tiny detail that told him everything about what was coming. He read the momentum building in the man's shoulder, the subtle shift right before an axe swing, a signal most warriors would never think to watch for. From those two details alone, he could calculate where the axe blade would land seconds before it even moved. This part, he thought, wasn't the hard part. The true skill had been forged long before this match during countless quiet nights alone. He had run simulated battles over and over in his mind until every scenario became second nature. Factoring in the raw power of Bessemer's swing as the axe came crashing down toward him, he made the final calculation needed to counter, adjusting the flow of mana into the blade and tightening his grip as the enchanted sword responded, ready to meet the incoming blow with the exact force required. The blades collided, and Bessemer's axe was violently deflected off course, sparks and light bursting from the point of impact. As the massive man stumbled back, rage twisted Bessemer's face as he regained his footing, spitting insults at the boy who had just used his own strength against him. He roared at him to stop dragging this out and just fall, swinging his axe again with even greater force. From the sidelines, the watching soldiers grew uneasy. One asked if Bessemer was taking the match too seriously, urging him to calm down since this was only supposed to be practice. Bessemer responded with a roaring command to shut up, his temper flying completely out of control as the fight slipped further from his grasp. The young master's blade cut through in a flash of light and motion, his expression sharp and unwavering as he spoke up, warning that anyone who dared interfere right now would face the consequences. He finished his thought as the swords clashed once more, declaring that no one had the right to disrupt what both sides had agreed was a sacred duel between them. The final blow tore through the air, a blur of motion and color marking the end of the exchange, leaving the duel's outcome hanging on that decisive strike. The bearded warrior roared down at the boy on the ground, his voice dripping with malice as he swore his axe would tear him apart. He raised his weapon high above his head, ready to end the match with a single crushing blow. In that fleeting second, a thought flashed through the young master's mind. Crossing swords with Bessemer had taught him something crucial about the man standing before him. He recalled Carlson's sword from an earlier encounter, remembering how it felt far heavier and much more refined than the weapon he was currently facing. A wave of certainty washed over him. He realized with sudden clarity that this fight was actually winnable. The axe came crashing down in a wide, brutal arc, closing the distance between them as the young master braced himself, raising his sword to meet it. Bessemer's eyes widened. The instant the weapon struck, disbelief washed over his face as he watched his own axe begin to slip from his grip. The weapon spun through the air and slammed into the dirt, embedding itself uselessly, completely out of his hands. Both groups of soldiers watched from a distance, tension thick in the air as they realized what had just transpired between the two fighters. The young master calmly reminded him that a waiter-style duel carried a simple rule: it ended the moment one side's weapon touched the ground, and Bessemer's axe was currently sitting right there in the dirt. Among the stunned crowd, a soldier was rendered nearly speechless, whispering that the boy had actually won. Disbelief spread through the rest of the group as they rushed forward, repeating the realization to one another, unable to fully comprehend what they had just witnessed. One soldier yanked him by the hair, laughing and calling him a brat, only for the young master to sharply correct him, declaring his name for all to hear: Isaac von Goethe. Bessemer's voice boomed above the noise, forcing the surrounding soldiers into silence with a furious demand for everyone to shut their mouths. The soldiers around Isaac backed away as heavy footsteps drew near. Bessemer marched toward him with clear hostility written across his face, grabbing Isaac by the collar. He roared that no ordinary warrior could turn the tides like that, demanding to know exactly what trick had been used against him. Unflinching, Isaac asked point-blank if Bessemer intended to deny his own defeat and whether he was truly ready to throw away a warrior's honor over it. Bessemer's rage only deepened. He spat back that Isaac had defiled the sanctity of the duel, swearing that the insult would be washed away in his blood. From further down the road, several figures approached rapidly. One shouted furiously at the standing soldiers, demanding to know why none of them had stepped in to stop what was happening. From further down the road, several figures approached rapidly. One shouted furiously at the standing soldiers, demanding to know why none of them had stepped in to stop what was happening. Anger flared across the soldiers' faces as the threat landed and the warning was made clear: anyone standing there would be executed for treason if Isaac was harmed. Chaos erupted among Bessemer's men as several soldiers grabbed him. One screamed at him to snap out of it, while another accused him of being a lunatic trying to drag them all to their deaths. Isaac struggled against the hands holding him back, demanding to be let go. Bessemer's face was twisted with suppressed fury, sweat pouring down his forehead as his men used all their strength to hold him back. He screamed again, louder this time, repeating his order for them to unhand him immediately. Late that night under a starry sky, a voice broke the silence, asking why they hadn't been warned about the plan beforehand. Sitting on his bed with his sword across his lap, Isaac calmly explained that he needed both his companion and Hans to react convincingly so that Bessemer would take the bait and look down on him. Schiller's response came dry and dripping with suspicion. Placing a hand over his forehead, clearly dazed, Schiller asked since when Isaac had been capable of pulling off something like that. He looked straight at Isaac, piecing the clues together, pointing out the strange magic he had witnessed ever since the previous mana explosion. Schiller asked point-blank why Isaac hadn't told them the truth from the start. Isaac's answer was simple: Schiller already knew the reason, as his own condition mirrored that of the figure from a century ago. Schiller froze, calling it a bloodline awakening before adding that his father would never have allowed Isaac access to the records of past generations. Isaac's expression turned distant as he admitted that given his critical condition at the time, he hadn't cared about asking for permission. He had snuck in and searched those records himself. He went on to explain that if word got out that he could use magic, no one in the kingdom would accept it, asking Schiller to keep the secret with him. Schiller's eyes narrowed with unease as a question took shape in his mind. Was magic truly the only thing Isaac was hiding from everyone around him? In a quiet hallway bathed in faint moonlight, a sharp-eyed man in formal attire stood by the door, observing something taking place out of sight. Inside the room, a woman knelt gently beside a bed, tending to a young child while a tall figure stood close behind, watching silently. The child on the bed slept peacefully, breath visible in the cold air, completely oblivious to everything happening around them. Time had passed since then, and now Isaac knelt with sword in hand, a quiet realization settling in that at some point, without fully noticing it, he had become a completely different person. He tightened his grip around the blade, whispering a word of agreement to himself, steady and resolute. Turning to Schiller, Isaac told him he needed to ask for a favor. Schiller straightened up, asking carefully what kind of favor it was. Schiller studied him closely, putting two and two together on his own, realizing that the recent duel had officially granted Isaac command over Winfeld. Isaac's gaze sharpened, calm and certain, as he declared that the time had finally come for him to start acting like a true lord. Snow fell silently over the fortified outpost as lanterns flickered along the walls, guard towers standing watch over the rows of tents where soldiers rested before the coming conflict.